And audible. Thanks, Ashwin. We're still waiting for a lot of people to join in. It's only about 11 people who have joined. Half the class have joined. That's all. Good afternoon. 20888825, who's very insistent that he or she will not enter the name. Hi, Sri Lakshmi. No video yet. Is Jawahar connected? Maybe not yet. Anyway, we'll start. You guys, whenever you're comfortable, can log into the video. So we'll continue from yesterday. Let the others join in when they can. I'm sure everyone knows what the timing is, so we'll not wait for them. So we were discussing yesterday about the concept of how trade, one type of trade leads to another, import leading to exports and export leading to imports. So I'll just go one step behind and start from that explanation again. I'll repeat that particular cycle that we drew. So you can call it as a cycle of trade or whatever it is. So a step before that, we were talking about how exchange rate is determined. All right. And assume that we have a scenario where $1 is equal to, let's say, 1 rupee. Yeah. Now, because of demand, excess demand for dollar, because of excess demand for a dollar, or maybe excess supply of rupee, whatever be the case, or a combination of both, we arrive at a scenario where $1 is equal to 2 rupees. Okay. So what is happening? Let us look at it first from the dollar's perspective. That is easier to understand. So dollar, whose value was only 1 rupee, now the same dollar's value is 2 rupees, which means the value of dollar has increased. The value of dollar has increased. So to get a dollar, you had to first pay 1 rupee. Now to get a dollar, you have to pay 2 rupees, which means that the value of dollar has increased. This process, we'll call it as appreciation of dollar. Okay, appreciation of dollar. So naturally, the reverse process where $1 is equal to 2 rupee, becoming $1 is equal to 1 rupee will become depreciation of dollar, right? So this downward thing. So this is appreciation of dollar. The reverse will be depreciation of dollar. Let's look at simultaneously what is happening here. 1 rupee was equal to $1 in this case, but in this case, 1 rupee is equal to half a dollar. So $1 is equal to 2 rupees means 1 rupee is equal to half a dollar. So $0.5, which means when dollar is getting appreciated, simultaneously what is happening? The rupee's value is actually coming down. You gave a rupee, you used to get $1. You are giving a rupee, you're only getting half a dollar. Okay? Or you can buy a rupee at half the price as previously, which means that the rupee is losing its value. The rupee is becoming cheaper. The rupee is losing its value. So this is what we call as depreciation of rupee. The value of rupee is depreciating. The value of rupee is depreciating. Both are the same things. I'm just writing the same equation in two different ways. I'm not thinking of any, I'm not giving you any different scenario. Both are what is happening at the same time. When $1 is equal to 2 rupees, it automatically means 1 rupee is equal to half a dollar. Okay. So that is what it means. So that is depreciation of rupee. All right. Just a second. All right. So that is what is the difference between appreciation and depreciation. simultaneously, if you are given a number and you are asked, you are given an exchange rate and a change in exchange rate, and you are asked a question whether it is appreciation or depreciation. Now, can you tell me $1 is equal to rupees 50, $1 is becoming rupees 70. What is happening here? Appreciation or depreciation? Can you answer? What is happening? Appreciation or depreciation? What is happening here? Amshi, correct? Very good. Very good. I like the answers that you are giving. So there is never a concept called as appreciation or depreciation alone. It is always a concept of appreciation of what? Depreciation of what? If you look at it, both appreciation and depreciation are happening here. What is happening? Appreciation is happening to the dollar, simultaneously depreciation is happening to the rupee. Okay, so you always have to be very, very clear that whenever you would talk about appreciation or depreciation, you talk about which currency are you talking about, because both are similar commodities. In the other case, in inflation, you will say there is a price rise, there is a price, there is inflation. Inflation itself means rise in price. Type of value of money. On the other, you have a commodity. There, it's easier to understand. Here, two similar kinds of commodities. You need to be very explicit. Which one, whose value increase or decrease are you talking about? So that is something that you need to be careful about over here. But when you read newspapers, as depreciation, they may not mention rupee because it is understood in the context in which they are talking that we'll only be talking about Indian rupee. So that is why we normally we don't care about, why would we care about US dollar? What happens to US dollar? So we generally tend to speak about this as depreciation of rupee rather than mentioning it as appreciation of dollar, because we don't care about dollar. Dollar is not our currency. We don't care whether it is strengthening, it is weakening. What we care about is the rupee. Okay, so if that is the case, why are we writing it like this? Because it's easier to write it this way, right? You can look at it and you can say the rupee's value is decreasing, the rupee's value is further decreasing. It is easier to call it as depreciation. Then why is it that we write it like this, $1 equal to, and then we are talking about it in terms of rupee? The reason is that it is very difficult to talk about it this such an equation in terms of rupee. Let's say 1 rupee is equal to $1 is equal to 1 rupee, $1 is equal to 2 rupee, and all those you can convert and say 1 rupee is equal to $1, 1 rupee is equal to half a dollar, 1 rupee is equal to 1/4 of a dollar. That is easy. But beyond, you will have to say, in this first case, you will have to say 1 rupee is equal to 1 by $50, or 1 rupee is equal to 1 by $70. Now imagine how difficult it is to understand this calculation and speak about it. That is the reason why we write it this way, but we speak about it in terms of what is happening to the rupee. Okay, so this is the concept of appreciation and depreciation. Now moving on to yesterday's, that cycle that we were talking about. So there is let us say a lot of imports happening. There's a lot of imports happening. There's an increase in imports, assuming that to begin with $1 is equal to rupees 50. Same example as yesterday. So there is a lot of imports happening. When a lot of imports are happening, the importer will go to the bank and say, please give me more dollars. Please give me more dollars. Why? Because with that dollar is what the importer has to go to the international market, pay for whatever the person is importing, oil or food supplies or whatever it is that they are importing. So within the country, there is an increase in the demand for dollar. And when there is an increase in the demand for dollar within the country, that will reflect, because India is not the printer of dollars. India has to earn the dollars from somewhere, so it will have to get it from other places. So again, India is demanding more and more dollar from the international market. So demand for dollar increases. So with increase in imports, demand for dollar increases. What happens when the demand for dollar increases? I told you this yesterday itself. When the demand for a particular commodity increases, the value of that commodity goes up. So here dollar appreciates, but we don't care about dollar. When we are talking about appreciation, depreciation, we want to talk about it from the perspective of rupee. Okay, even if you understand it as demand for dollar increases, dollar appreciates, you automatically say if dollar appreciates in comparison to rupee, rupee has to depreciate. So you say rupee depreciates. Rupee depreciates and becomes $1 is equal to rupees 100. Okay, now look at it from the perspective of traders. The importer is feeling, earlier I had to pay out of my pocket, I had to pay 50 rupees to get a dollar, and I was doing a lot of that. But now I have to pay 100 rupees out of my pocket to get $1 to go and buy the same commodity. See, earlier, let's say 1 barrel of oil cost me $1. Assume that. Okay, 1 barrel of oil cost me $1, and I used to pay 50 rupees to get that $1 to go and buy that barrel of oil. Now, in effect, from an Indian perspective, I would say 1 barrel of oil cost me 50 rupees because I paid 50 rupees to get a dollar, and then I went and bought that barrel of oil for $1. Now, internationally, the price of the barrel of oil is not changing. Assume that it is still $1. But because of the increased demand for dollar and the depreciation of the currency, Indian currency, now when I go to the bank is saying, no, you have to pay me 100 rupees to get that dollar. So I pay 100 rupees, get the dollar, go to the international market, it is still the same dollar. The price of that barrel of oil is still $1. So I pay $1, get that barrel of oil. But when I think of it from an Indian perspective, the price of 1 barrel of oil, although it is still $1 internationally, from my perspective, domestically, it has become 100 rupees. What was earlier 50 rupees has now become 100 rupees. There is a law in economics which says that when the price of a commodity goes up, the demand for it goes down. We all noticed that. Whenever price of something goes up, we think twice about buying it. Okay, that is a natural tendency. So rupee depreciates, the imports will start decreasing. Imports will start decreasing. Now, this is a situation which exporters really like. Depreciation of rupee is a situation which exporters love. Why do they love it? Earlier, they were producing something. Let's say exporters are producing this pen and they are selling it at $1 in the international market. Okay, they are selling it at $1. They'll earn $1. They'll come to the bank and give it, and they used to get only 50 rupees earlier. Let's say they were producing at 45 rupees or something, and they're getting 50 rupees and they're happy with it. Okay. But now what is happening? Because of depreciation of rupee, they produce the pen at the same 45 rupees. They sell it in the international market at the same $1. But this time when they bring the dollar and convert it, they are getting more money in their hands. They produce at 45, they are getting 100 rupees for it, which is a lot of profit for them. So they will produce more and more in order to improve their exports. They'll produce more and more to increase their exports. But the same law that I told you earlier applies here also. If you are selling the product at $1 itself, why would there be an increase in the consumption? Why would there be an increase in exports? So what will happen? This depreciation allows the exporters to sell their commodities at slightly lesser prices. Now, they need not sell at $1. Earlier, they were selling at $1 because that is when they would get a bare minimum of 50 rupees. Now, they can afford to sell it at, let's say, $0.75. They sell it internationally at $0.75, they'll still get 75 rupees, which is more than the 50 rupees that they were getting earlier. And when the price of a commodity goes down, we are likely to buy more and more of it. You think of it, when you get discounts, are you likely to buy more, or are you likely to not buy or not make any difference? With discounts, there is a higher likelihood of buying more and more. So this depreciation allows the exporters to reduce their international price a little bit, so that even at a reduced cost, they are able to make a higher level of profit. Now, this will result in an increase in exports, or this could result in an increase in exports. All right. So that this increase in exports means that there is a more and more commodities being sold outside, which means that we are earning dollar. That dollar, the exporters will take it to the bank, convert it to the rupee, and they'll take the rupee, and that rupee is what they'll use for further production. So there is an excess supply of dollars now, more than earlier, because the exports have increased, the earnings have also increased. So there is an increase in the supply of dollars. Supply of dollar increases. SS stands for supply, DD stands for demand. There's an increase in the supply of dollar, and that results in, when there is an increase in the supply of dollar, the value of dollar goes down, which means dollar depreciates, which automatically means from the rupee perspective, rupee appreciates. When rupee appreciates, which means it goes back to $1 is equal to 50 rupees. Once again, exporters now feel we cannot afford to sell our product at $0.75 anymore, because we are not going to get any profit. We are going to make a loss. Okay, so which means that we will have to raise the price once again. We'll have to sell internationally again at $1, which means less number of people will now buy. Exports reduces automatically, and this is a situation which once again favors the importers, as we have already discussed, resulting in increased imports. This was what we had discussed yesterday. Lalit, you have asked a question. Can you tell me if my explanation currently has answered that question, or do you still have that question? Lalit Kumar? Okay, great. Moving on then. So a concept related to what we have discussed so far, we have already discussed what is meant by appreciation. We have discussed what is meant by depreciation. What is appreciation? Increase in the value of a currency in comparison with another currency. Okay. What is depreciation? Decrease in the value of a currency in comparison with another currency. That is appreciation and depreciation. But there is a phrase to be added at the end. The phrase to be added at the end is as a result of market forces. In both the cases, you will have to add this at the end. So appreciation is increase in the value of a currency in comparison with another currency as a result of market forces. And what are market forces? Yesterday itself I told you, demand and supply. Demand for one currency, supply of that currency, or demand for another currency, supply of that currency. Depreciation is decrease in the value of one currency in comparison with another currency as a result of market forces. All right. Now, why did I specifically add this particular concept here? Because there exists another concept with respect to currency exchange rates. Okay. There is a concept called as revaluation and devaluation. Revaluation is the increase in the value of one currency in comparison to another currency. Devaluation is the decrease in the valuation of one currency in comparison to the other currency. However, this one or these two would be as a result of government action. When I say government, I mean the government, the Reserve Bank of India, any authority, as a result of monetary authorities' action or government's action. That is what I mean by that government action. So that is revaluation and devaluation, where instead of demand and supply dictating what the exchange rate is, the government will come and dictate, okay, as of today, $1 is equal to 10 rupees. And then it may remain the same for the next 5 years. And then after 5 years, one fine day, government is deciding, okay, from today, $1 is going to be 25 rupees. Or $1 is going to be only 5 rupees. That decision is taken by the government based on whatever reason that they have, based on whatever factor could be there, but the government decides it. The market does not allow it to fluctuate. Now think of it this way. Till a few, let's say, few not months, maybe a year or so ago, the prices of fuel were entirely dictated by the government. The government would announce what the price of fuel would be. The government would announce a hike. The government would announce a decrease in the price. Everything was dictated by the government. And there was a revision once in 15 days or so. Every 15 days, the government would revise the prices. They may keep the prices the same. They may increase it. They may decrease it. But over the last year and a half, now with COVID, we are losing track of what was the time that was passed. So the last 1 year, there's barely been any action. So maybe it is more than a year also. maybe over the last 1.5 or 2 years, what the government did is government said, I am not going to interfere in this. The companies themselves can decide. So how will companies decide? Based on what is the market value. So market forces have now started playing almost on a daily basis. Not almost, on a daily basis, the price of fuel goes up, comes down. You have been reading the news, the price of fuel is increasing by say 20 paise, 30 paise on a daily basis. The government used to increase by 3 rupees, 4 rupees once every 15 days, and we thought, oh my god, there's such a huge increase in price. Now the price is increasing by 20 paise, 30 paise on a daily basis. In the 15-day period, maybe prices increase by 5 rupees, but we don't even feel it. Why? Because there is no immediate announcement that is made. So that is an example. Currently, what is happening with respect to fuel prices is more like appreciation, depreciation. Whereas what used to happen earlier was revaluation, devaluation. Similar to that. Okay, I'm just bringing a comparison between these two things. So that is the concept here. Now coming to, based on this understanding, we'll take a look at different types of exchange rates. So first we have a type called as flexible or floating exchange rate system. Flexible or floating exchange rate system. Okay, flexible or floating exchange rate system, which is also called as clean float. Which is also called as clean float. Now, what is the system? Whatever we have seen so far, as an example, how to determine the exchange rate, where only the market forces of demand of dollar, supply of dollar, demand of rupee, supply of rupee, only that and that alone will determine what will be the exchange rate. That is flexible exchange rate system. So that is what we have seen so far. Number two, we have a system called as flexible or floating. You can also call it as floating exchange rate system with central bank intervention. With central bank intervention. This is also called as dirty float. This is also called as dirty float. Flexible exchange rate system with central bank intervention. Now run your mind back to what we were discussing yesterday with respect to balancing the balance of payments. You remember I told you about a system called as balancing through accommodative transactions. I said there is something called as autonomous balancing, and then there is something called as balancing through accommodative transactions. So what does the RBI do? Whenever RBI feels that there is a shortage of dollars in the banking system, whenever there is a shortage of dollars, what it means, the demand is greater than the supply. That is what it means, right? So automatically what is supposed to happen? Whenever the demand is greater than the supply, the dollar should appreciate, or in other words, the rupee should depreciate. Okay, when the rupee depreciates, automatically the importers will stop importing, or the exporters will start increasing their exports. That is what will likely to happen, and eventually some level of balance is attained, sometimes at a higher level, higher dollar value than previously. That is how the new equilibrium will be attained. But when the reason why RBI intervenes is that sometimes RBI feels the rupee depreciating at this point may aid exports, but it is going to harm our imports significantly. We cannot allow that to happen. We need to intervene and ensure that the exchange rate does not depreciate. The rupee does not depreciate significantly. So what does the RBI do? The RBI artificially, out of its reserve, it brings in some dollars and increases the supply, artificially increases the supply of dollars in the market. Okay, that is what we call as the intervention of the central bank. RBI artificially brings in some extra dollars and supplies it. It is not naturally available in the course of transactions. We did not earn that dollar through exports or any other mechanism. The RBI is artificially taking some money out of its reserves and making it available to the banking system. So that is an intervention. Okay. Similarly, when there is an excess dollar available, Indian rupee will significantly appreciate. Significant appreciation in rupee could lead to unnecessary imports, could lead to export suffering. In all these situations, the RBI feels it could again be harmful for the economy. So what the RBI will do, RBI will go and buy those dollars and keep it in its reserve. Once again, trying to control the rates in the economy, the exchange rates in the economy. So this is called as flexible exchange rate system with central bank intervention, or dirty float. Dirty float because there is an intervention. It is not clean anymore. Notice this very, very carefully. This is not devaluation, revaluation. Here, the central bank is not deciding the exchange rate. The central bank is only trying to affect the market itself. It is still the market which is determining the exchange rate. It is still the demand and supply of dollar, demand and supply of rupee, which is determining the exchange rate. The RBI is only trying to affect the demand and supply, not directly the exchange rate. So it is still depreciation and appreciation which is happening. The RBI is not fixing the exchange rate. The RBI is trying to increase the supply or decrease the supply. But when RBI does that, it does not necessarily guarantee that depreciation will happen. The people may continue to demand more of dollar or supply more of dollar. It may continue, and as a result, RBI's actions may even become useless. It may not have the desired impact. RBI may feel there is far too much dollar and may take away some dollar to the reserve. But during the same time, there might be more and more supply of dollar coming in, which means that the RBI's action was pretty much useless at that point of time. So that is also a possibility. Here, the RBI has a limited control over the demand and supply. That is all that they have. They only have a control over demand and supply, not over the exchange rate. I hope this point is very, very clear to you. In the flexible exchange rate system with central bank intervention, the central bank does not have any control over the exchange rate. It is still market determined. The RBI only tries to control the market forces of demand and supply, and it can only try. It cannot be very sure about the results of its action. Okay. So number 3. Number 3 is where you will get to the zone of your devaluation and revaluation. So which is called as fixed exchange rate system. Fixed exchange rate system. It is also called as pegged exchange rate system. Fixed or pegged exchange rate system. See, in a fixed exchange rate system, the RBI or the central government makes a declaration one day that from today onwards, the exchange rate between dollar and rupee is going to be $1 is equal to 10 rupees. Okay. That is going to be the exchange rate till the government makes another announcement on some other day saying, okay, from today onwards, the exchange rate is going to be $1 is equal to 5 rupees, or $1 is equal to 15 rupees or 20 rupees. Whatever the government wants to announce based on its internal factors, whatever it decides to be the factor behind this decision, that till that point of time, and there is no guarantee as to when that time will be. It may be tomorrow, it may be 1 week later, it may be 1 month later, it may be 1 year later, it may be 5 years later, we don't know. At irregular intervals, the government may come and adjust the exchange rate. Ideally speaking, how should they adjust the exchange rate? At a different point of time, let's say 1 year later, they are trying to adjust the exchange rate. They have to take a look at, okay, what is the exchange rate? What is the supply of dollar right now? What is the demand for dollar right now? And then based on it, what would have been the market exchange rate? Based on that, they'll have to arrive at. That is how logic says. But it is not always like that, because the government has control over it. The government feels, okay, we have a lot of loans to repay. To repay the loan, it is better if our currency is appreciated. So they will, or our currency is highly valued. So they may revalue our currency just to repay the loan. They may revalue the currency just to repay our loan. So let us say in a particular year, in a particular period, the Indian economy is exporting a lot. Exporters will benefit only when the currency's value is low. So at that time, what will they do? They'll say, okay, let us devalue the currency so that the exporters benefit. That sort of manipulation can happen. Okay. You would have heard of the saying that China keeps devaluing its currency from time to time, manipulator of currency. They have not done, at least openly in the recent past, last 5 years or so, they have not done, and it has always been an accusation. It has not been proved. But you understand the logic behind their devaluation, right? Look at this cycle. So they export a lot. China exports a lot. What should happen to their currency? The supply of dollars should increase. Their currency should appreciate. Chinese yuan should appreciate. When it appreciates, it is going to encourage imports and discourage exports. So to prevent that from happening, from this stage, when it appreciates, they'll quickly import whatever they want to import. At that time, they'll import whatever they want to import, and they will devalue their currency. They'll devalue their currency, and they'll take all the excess currency and put it in their reserve. They'll take all the excess currency and put it in their reserve. Their currency once again is devalued, and from there exports will is again boosted. This is one way in which they could, if they want to. All right. So that is fixed exchange rate system. Now coming to the last type of exchange rate system, we have something called as adjustable peg exchange rate system. Adjustable peg exchange rate system. Now, what is adjustable peg exchange rate system? You remember the system that I told you about with respect to oil prices, fuel prices till about 2 years ago. Every 15 days, the government will come and see what is the market requirement. Based on that, they will fix what the price is going to be, but based on the market factors. And there is a guarantee, or there is a predictability that every 15 days they'll monitor and they'll take a decision with respect to fuel prices. So there is at regular intervals an adjustment in the prices. Okay, so there is at regular intervals. In the earlier system, fixed exchange rate system, it may not change for a period of time. Suddenly it changes, then it will not period, then immediately it changes, then for a long period it may not change. So there is no predictability with respect to the fixed exchange rate system. Whereas in an adjustable peg system, they know that every 15th and every first of every month and maybe 16th of every month, there will be an adjustment. Okay. And how is that adjustment done? Based on market conditions. So the idea is that if we had allowed the exchange rate to be adjusted based on the market conditions, what would have been the exchange rate 15 days later? That is what they are likely to keep. And once again, they'll wait for another 15 days. And if we had allowed the exchange rate to be determined by market, what would it have been? Let us fix it at that. So that is how it is going to be. Then you might ask, then why not leave it as market rate itself? Why keep it as a government fixed rate? The reason is, for those 15 days, it gives some predictability to the businesses. Now, today, let's say I'm running a business, I'm an importer or I'm an exporter. I'm taking a decision. Okay, in the coming week, I'm going to import so many things. So I need to make budgetary allocations in my company. I need to make some budgetary allocations. How will I make? I'll have to look at today's exchange rate and make the budgetary allocation. But 10 days later, when I'm actually trying to import, because of the market rate changes, the rate has significant or slightly varied. And when it's huge sum, even that slight variation is going to bring about a huge change in my expenditure patterns in terms of Indian rupees. So that brings about a level of uncertainty. Whereas if you have a system like this, where at regular intervals, the government changes, but purely with respect to the market conditions, then it can lend a semblance of predictability to the exchange rate. That is the idea behind this. So if you ask me personally, this looks like the best system that is there. But the problem is that, just like with fuel prices, you know that fuel prices are most of the times market determined, but when it comes closer to election, even if the market factors say price has to go up, the government will say price has to go down. because those are electoral factors and other factors which come into the picture. Similarly, with respect to exchange rate also, if there is some level of control, even if it has to be adjusted every 15 days, there is no guarantee that it will be adjusted based on purely market factors. Okay, so as a result of that, we are not following this system anymore, or ever we did not follow this system ever. We were following a fixed exchange rate system till 1991, even till 1990, yeah, 1991, till 1991. And from 1991 onwards, when the LPG came about, we moved to a system of flexible exchange rate system with RBI intervention. So we were following this system. From this, we moved to this system. India has been following the second system, since then most of the world countries are following the second. Okay, most of the world countries are following the second one. I can't think of any country in the world which is following the first system, because everyone says at some point the country's priorities have to be considered and the central bank or the government will intervene. So there is some level of intervention in all the countries. So this is not there. There might be still a lot of countries which are following a fixed exchange rate system or an adjustable peg exchange rate system. There might be there. We are currently following a flexible exchange rate system though. Okay. Now, I just introduced the concept that in 1991 a few changes were made. Let us try to understand the situation in 1991 a little bit more. Okay, the concept of liberalization, privatization, and globalization. Why this came about? So for that we need to understand what was the situation just prior to 1991. Okay, 1991. Indian economy was predominantly closed in nature. It was open to a small extent, but it was predominantly closed in nature, which means what? Imports were heavily restricted. Only essential imports. But the problem is that because India did not produce oil, India did not have the latest technology, because of all these reasons, raw materials, a lot of raw materials were not available. Because of these reasons, we had to import a lot, even if it meant only essential commodities were getting imported. We were importing a lot. Okay. So if we are importing a lot, what should happen to our exchange rate? Our exchange rate should be low or high. If you are importing a lot, if you are a country which is dependent on a lot of imports, what should be our exchange rate? Should the exchange rate be low or should the exchange rate be high? Tell me, I'll give you two options. Out of the two options, which should be preferred by importers? $1 is equal to 10 rupees, $1 is equal to 40 rupees. Which would importers prefer? $1 is equal to 10, $1 is equal to 40. Which would importers prefer? Obviously, they'll prefer $1 is equal to 10, because they have to only pay 10 rupees to get a dollar and they can import. So India used to artificially revalue its currency, which means overvaluing its currency beyond what should have been there. India would keep it at a higher level. India would, when I say high, I mean Indian currency is overvalued. $1 is equal to 10 rupees is a higher value than $1 is equal to 40 rupees with respect to the Indian currency. So Indian currency was heavily overvalued at that point of time. So overvalued currency, because we had to import a lot. When you overvalue the currency, what happens? Exports will not rise or not encouraged. It is not a decline per se, but it is not encouraged. Not encouraged. So what happens? Demand for dollar is high, supply of dollar is low. Because imports are high, because it is still overvalued. Imports are high, demand for dollar is high, supply of dollar is low. This is the situation. Okay. India, the government knew this is the situation. Government was artificially fixing the exchange rates as well. The government was dependent on a situation where they said we have to import a lot. Okay, we don't have enough money for our imports, so we'll try to import from friendly nations. We'll try to import from Russia, we'll try to import from some West Asian countries, only from friendly nations, not Russia, USSR. Okay, only from friendly nations we would import. Okay, and we'll try to get it at as low a cost as possible. That is the idea there. Plus, we were dependent on a lot of the remittances which were coming from these West Asian countries. A lot of remittances came from West Asian countries. So if we get remittance from West Asian countries, we can use that same money to pay them for their oil. Okay, so this was the idea. This was the idea behind how India was doing. And every year, year after year, what was happening? Whatever money we were getting was not sufficient to meet our expenses. So the Reserve Bank of India would take money out of its reserve and supply it in the market. Take money out of its reserve, supply in the market. Take loan from outside, supply it in the market. Take loan from outside, supply it in the market. So the government was continuously doing this over the years. But the problem came, we were trying to manage this to a large extent, but the problem came in the phase of 1987, 88 to the next 2-3 years. What happened during this period? The USSR started crumbling. The USSR started disintegrating. So one of our major so-called allies, I know that we were non-aligned, but in reality, they were our allies, and USSR started crumbling and breaking into many nations. So our ally there disappeared. In addition, there was something called as the Gulf War, which was happening at that point of time. The Gulf War meant that because of the war there, the oil prices shot up because the supply of oil decreased. Oil prices shot up. In addition to that, the remittances which were mostly coming from there, the remittances also went down because war is happening over there. They are not getting paid their salaries or any of those things. So it was attack from all sides for us. USSR disintegrated, West Asian war crisis, Gulf War crisis, which meant that oil prices went up, remittances went down. Overall, we did not have any foreign currency, dollar or any other foreign currency to pay for our imports. We were not even able to import. It went to such an extent where we were at a situation where if 2 more weeks we had imported, then we would have zero foreign currency with us. We would have completely wiped our forex reserves, and then we would not have been able to pay for our imports at all. When it reached such a situation, there is an organization whose primary mandate is to ensure balance of payments issues are resolved in the world, to monitor and cater to the balance of payment issues across the world. Such an organization is International Monetary Fund. So India went to the International Monetary Fund. International Monetary Fund says I alone cannot help. Let's call in the World Bank also. So International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, which is also called as World Bank. They stepped into the picture. They said, okay, fine. What do you want? India said, we want a loan to help us get over the issue right now. Can you give us a loan? And it was a huge amount. Okay. They said, all right, fine. We will give you a loan, but it has to be conditional. Now, India was not in a position to bargain. India said, okay, fine. Now we can't do anything. Whatever you say, if it's reasonable, we'll try to do it. We will do it. So they lay a few conditions for us. They said, your biggest problem are a few things. Number one, you are not allowing import of everything. So India said, why should we allow import of everything? Already with existing things, there is far too much imports. Okay, said, no, listen to us completely. You have to allow import of everything. Because if you restrict imports, the problem is that exports will also restrict it. You're telling a country, we will not import some goods from you. We will not import TV or fridge or radios or vehicles from you. If you say that, they'll also say, we will not import things from you. So if you want to boost your exports, the only way to do is to allow imports from other countries. You remember right in the first class, the external sector, link with the external sector. When we open the external sector to another country for exports, we are in a way forced to allow imports from that country also. Okay, so exports, you open your economy for further imports, exports will automatically happen. But for all this to happen, one more thing has to happen. Exports will automatically not get promoted. You should stop controlling the currency. You should let the market decide what should be the exchange rate. If you had done that in the past itself, you would not have landed in this trouble. You would not have landed in this trouble because importers would have tried to curtail their imports to a large extent, or it could have encouraged exports, and you would have been in a better position. You would not have landed in this trouble. So they said a few things. The things that they said is, first of all, globalize your economy, integrate with the rest of the world, globalize your economy, allow imports and exports, allow foreign companies to come and set up branches in your country, allow them to you will get more technology, you will get more efficient ways of production. In that way your exports can also increase. So globalization. India said, okay, fine, we don't have any other option. And in fact, India was already in the path of globalization. Why do I say so? With your IT companies being set up in the late 1970s and early 1980s, all the major IT companies you think of, TCS, Infosys, Wipro, all those companies were set up in the late 1970s and 1980s itself. Okay, which means that India was already on the path of globalization. So that being a success itself was a proof for India that, okay, we think this is the way forward. So globalization, India agreed. And then the IMF said, see, globalization will not be a success as long as you don't allow private players to have freely start business in your country. If you are going to strictly regulate, saying that only government will work in this area, no foreign entity will come and say, okay, let us compete with the government. No one will have the ability to compete with the government. You will take all the resources. So you step out of commercial activities, business activities, let the private, give the permission to private to do it. So they said, for globalization to succeed, you have to ensure that privatization happens. Privatization of the economy happens. So when privatization happens, this will encourage more and more private entities from abroad to come and set up businesses here or trade with the companies. So they said, allow privatization. So government said, okay, we have to consider that also. Again, these IT companies are all private, they are doing well, so we will allow privatization. Then the IMF said another thing. You said, just because you privatize, it is not going to make the private players come in. Just because you say, okay, we are going to step out, you come and do it, it is not going to happen. You will have to relax the rules of business. If you say that we will allow you to do it, but there are strict rules with respect to doing. India has always allowed private participation. In the 1950s, 60s, 70s, 80s, throughout private participation was allowed. The problem was that it was very difficult to get a permission, get a license for the private to enter. That was called as the license Raj during that time. You apply for a license, you would not get the license. It would be a long time before you could possibly think of getting a license. So make all those license, issue of license, rules and regulations, make it easy for everyone so that more and more privatization happens. So which is what is called as liberal laws, bring in liberal rules. That is called as liberalization. So in order to ensure that India gets out of the current BOP crisis, they said, bring globalization. For that, bring privatization. For that, bring liberalization. This is the LPG. This is the backdrop in which India brought in the new economic policy of 1991, which liberalized the rules with respect to business, which allowed private entry, which also allowed international interactions for Indian companies or Indian interaction for foreign companies. So this is the concept of LPG. This is why LPG happened. And it is evidence, the current situation of India is evidence. The fact that we are having an online class here today is proof of the fact that this can be called a success. Now imagine if India was only continuing to do things in the pace in which we were doing in the 1980s, today it would not have been possible for us to have this online class. It would not have been possible, because the technology would not have come in, better management would not have come in, at least not at this cost. For your course, online course, you may have had to pay 2 times or 3 times or 4 times the money, because when there is not enough technology available, technology tends to be costlier. Think of the price of a very basic feature mobile phone 10 years ago. A basic feature keypad mobile phone used to cost 8,000, 9,000, 12,000 rupees. Now that is available for 1,000 rupees. Look at the price drop. 1/10 of the price is what is the price now. 10,000 rupee phone now costing 1,000 rupees. That is the change because of competition, because of better technology having come in. So that proves that this has been a success so far. And it has also increased the wealth of the people. All this has happened. You can also say it has increased inequality. It has pushed some people down while promoting the others. All that is there. You can always find a flaw with everything. But overall, in the larger scheme of things, we have had a lot of benefits as a result of LPG. People who criticize will criticize because there are a lot of flaws in the system. But no system is, before that we tried the other system. Even that system will lead to a lot of poverty across the country. Okay. I'm not advocating any system. I'm just giving you a perspective, because you might see a lot of people saying that this capitalism is the reason for all ill, social ills and all those. So look at the positive side of it as well. Okay. So that is about the LPG in India. Moving on. So with that, we actually complete the crux of the chapter. We will move on to some other topics, some extra topics that are left over. So terms related with external sector. So first, we'll talk about something called as currency convertibility. Currency convertibility refers, please note this down, currency convertibility refers to the ease with which one currency can be converted to another, which means the foreign currency can be converted to home currency or the home currency to foreign currency. Currency convertibility refers to the ease with which one currency can be exchanged for another, or the home currency can be exchanged for a foreign currency and vice versa. Right? So when we are talking about currency convertibility, automatically the question comes, can we have uniform rules with respect to convertibility? Whoever brings currency, the rules of conversion is going to be the same? No, that is not possible. So there are different rules depending on the purpose for which you are trying to convert the currency. So based on that, we'll classify again currency convertibility into current and capital. Current account, capital account. So we have current account convertibility and capital account convertibility. There are two concepts. Converting one currency to the other for the purpose of current account requirements, and one for the other for the purpose of capital account requirements. Now tell me, current account means the present needs. Current account is the present needs. Okay, so it is like, I need this money today, I need this commodity today, for that I need some currency. You go to the bank, you show I have an export license. Do you think the bank will ask any further questions if you show the export license or import license? No, because those are current requirements of the country. Plus, I told you, remember, current account earnings is the actual earnings of the country. It is money which belongs to India, not a temporary money. So it is not going to just like that go out one fine day. So current account in India is fully freely convertible. Which means if it is for the purpose of current account transactions, you can go to a bank without any difficulty, you can convert it. Foreign currency to Indian, Indian to foreign. Right? So that is about current account convertibility. Of course, on paper we say this, in reality there are going to be alterations. For example, if you are going to go on a tour, on a trip to USA, there is a limit to how much amount you can convert. So there are always going to be upper limits. You cannot convert any quantity of money because they don't want you to take away a lot of stuff without validation. You might be taking black money. So to prevent all those from there are going to be upper limits. But in general, it is fully freely convertible. Freely means without any restriction. But coming to capital account, in the capital account, we can't say it is completely restricted. Take a look at FDI. I told you in some automatic route. in some government approval route. Automatic route is nothing but fully convert or freely convertible. Government approval route is what? Before you convert, you need to get my approval. So there is a restriction with respect to conversion. FPI is hot money. Yesterday I told you about that. FPI is hot money. It could lead to instability. So the government will try to curtail it by saying it is not freely convertible. You need to seek permission, give at least a notice of a given period of time before you can convert it, before you can sell your shares and take your money away. So those are certain constraints that are there. The government will try to prevent a lot of external commercial borrowings, because otherwise what will companies do? The companies will, without any concern, borrow from abroad. It will increase the liability of India as a country. So government will try to restrict the external commercial borrowings of Indian firms to some extent. So there is always a restriction with respect to the capital account convertibility. In some cases there is restriction, to some limit it is freely. So which means that it is only partially convertible. It is partially convertible. So that's the concept of currency convertibility. See, interestingly, in the last 2020 prelims paper, there was, I have not seen the question on convertibility previously, but it was still part of the syllabus. So there were points where I used to wonder, is it really relevant? Last year, they gave a question saying, imagine in a situation where Indian currency is continuously depreciating, which of the following measures can be taken, or some other context like that? Maybe there is a global financial crisis, whatever the context, they said which of the following actions can be taken. They said make the capital account freely convertible. Making the capital account freely convertible will lead to, when there is a global uncertainty, there is a global financial crisis, it will lead to all the money leaving. Because there is uncertainty, everyone will say, I don't want to invest in shares anymore. Your country itself, economy may collapse. I'll sell the shares and I'll go out. So if you make the currency capital account freely convertible, it could lead to further instability in the economy. So one of the options given was make the capital account freely convertible to counter the global instability in the global financial crisis situation. That was a wrong point. But you will only be able to know it if you know the concept of convertibility and apply it over there. Simple questions are, what is currency account convertible or current account convertibility or capital account convertibility? They'll ask for the definition. That is a simple question. But they didn't ask simple question. They asked an application level question. Second, we have a concept called as purchasing power parity. You have come across this term in the second chapter in the heading called as Human Development Index, where the standard of living index, which was measured as per capita GNI, was converted to US dollar in using PPP. You take a look at the second chapter, Human Development Index, you will see this. All right. Purchasing power parity gives an exchange rate between two currencies. It gives the exchange rate, so gives an exchange rate between two currencies. Which indicate the standard of living in those two countries. Gives an exchange rate between two currencies which indicates the standard of living in those two countries. How did we define exchange rate yesterday? Yesterday we said exchange rate is how much of Indian rupee do I have to pay to get a dollar? Or if I give a dollar, how much Indian rupee will I get? That is what is the exchange rate, right? This is not that. Here we are not actually going to try and exchange one currency for another currency. We are just trying to mention one currency in terms of another currency. Okay. Now consider this. While measuring standard of living in Human Development Index, we say that per capita GNI is to be considered. per capita GNI is to be considered. Archana, I'll answer that after I finish this concept. I didn't see the question earlier, so I couldn't answer then. So per capita GNI, why are we measuring per capita GNI? Because it is indicative of the standard of living of the people. Okay, let's say the per capita GNI of India is rupees 1 lakh. The per capita GNI of India, gross national income of India, is 1 lakh rupees, which means on an average an Indian earns 1 lakh rupees in a year. Let us say for USA it is $50,000. For USA it is $50,000. Now how do we say whether Indians are having a good standard of living or Americans are having a good standard of living? Without converting, how can we say? Okay, so we need to convert. How is normally conversion done? We'll divide it by 70 rupees. If $1 is equal to 70 rupees, we'll divide it by 70 and then it will get converted to dollar. But the problem here is that this 70 is not an exchange rate which indicates the standard of living of the people. Here, no one is trying to exchange one currency for another currency. Then why should we use this? So we are thinking, can we use some other exchange rate in order to understand this? Can we use some other exchange rate? Can we use some other way of exchange rate which is more indicative of the quality of life of the people? So yes, that is where the concept of purchasing power parity comes into the picture. How does it work? Imagine that there is a basket of goods and services. What is this basket of goods and services? This basket of goods and services indicates a particular quality of life or particular standard of living. So it will have components like food, education, healthcare, housing. Then what do you have? Transportation, entertainment, and whatever else that is there, your fuel, whatever else that you can think of. It indicates one particular standard of living. So you ask a question to a person, what do you mean? When can you say that you are having a good quality of life? A person might say, I want this, and this. I want these things. In a year, I want this much of this. Okay. So you take a basket of goods and services which indicate a particular standard of living. Now we say, we do a survey across the globe. Let's say we ask a few people in India, America, China, Russia, Britain, then any other, Korea, Australia, Brazil, everywhere, Japan, everywhere we ask questions from people and we arrive at one particular basket of goods and services which is indicative of a decent standard of living for everyone in the world. It is highly impractical, but imagine that is what we are doing. So which means that if an American has this, he's having a particular standard of living. If an Indian has this, he's having the same standard of living as that person. If an Australian has this, that person is also having the same standard of living as an Indian and American. If a Japanese has this, that person is also having the same standard of living as these are three other people. And anyone who has this has the same standard of living. This indicates one particular standard of living of a person. Okay. Now we are equating, we are saying that the standard of living that is had by the people is the same. Now the question is, how much money will an American have to spend on this? Let us say it turns out that an American has to spend, let's say $500 on it. If an American pays $500, he or she is able to get this. Now we ask a question, how much will an Indian have to pay to get this? An Indian is saying, so in calculation, 10,000 rupees if I pay, I am able to have the standard of living. Similarly, for all the countries that you want to calculate, you will ask, how much do you have to pay in your country's currency to have the standard of living? Now, how is this 500 determined? This 500 is determined by the cost of producing food, cost of education, cost of health, cost of housing, based on the demand and supply in the country, based on the money supply in the country, based on the inflation levels in the country. Based on that, they arrive at the value of 500. All of them are domestic factors. Similarly, how come an Indian is arriving at the value of 10,000? Indian is saying based on the cost of production here, based on the price of the commodity, based on the increase in the price, inflation, based on my preferences, based on demand and supply, based on all the internal factors, it is arrived at that Indian needs 10,000 rupees to buy this set of goods and services. Now we are saying that if an American is earning $500 and an Indian is earning 10,000 rupees, both of them can have the same quality of life. Which means that $500 can provide the same quality of life as rupees 10,000. What we are trying to do is, this is the purchasing power. This is the purchasing power of the people. We are trying to bring about an equality in the, at what rate is there an equality in the purchasing power of the people? What is purchasing power? What can I do with my money? What can I purchase with my money? Whatever an American can purchase with $500, an Indian can purchase with 10,000 rupees, which means at $500 equal to 10,000 rupees, there is a parity in their purchasing power. With this money, they can both buy the same commodity, which means this is the rate at which there is a parity, which eventually comes down to $1 equal to 20 rupees. $1 equal to 20 rupees. So we have arrived at an exchange rate with which we cannot convert. We are not giving 20 rupees to get an actual dollar, or we are not giving a dollar and getting 20 rupees. But this exchange rate is indicative of the standard of living. We are saying that an American who's earning $1 and an Indian who's earning 20 rupees have the same standard of living. So now we take this and we convert this 1 lakh divided by 20, we'll get $5,000. On the basis of all the internal factors, internal prices and all those, we have arrived at an exchange rate, and we are saying that 10,000 or 1 lakh rupees can be converted to $5,000, which means an Indian on an average is earning $5,000 per year, an American on an average is earning $50,000 per year, which means an American is having 10 times the quality of life as an Indian. The standard of life of an American is 10 times better than Indian. Based on these numbers is what I'm saying. These are not facts. These are numbers that I am making up. Based on these numbers, I made an assumption that American per capita income is 50,000. Indian is 1 lakh, which now turns out to 5,000 based on internal factors. So that suggests that an American is on an average having a 10 times better life in terms of money than an Indian. All right. So that is a concept of purchasing power parity. It is a type of exchange rate, but it is not an actual physical exchange rate. It is indicative of the quality of life. Other places where the concept of purchasing power parity is used is, see, first of all, World Bank is the one which keeps releasing this number, but anyone can do it. World Bank also does it. Purchasing power parity. Currently, India's purchasing power parity rate is somewhere around $1 is equal to 20 rupees. Previously, till last year, it was 17 point something. Now it is 20 point something or 21 or something like that. I'm not very sure about the exact number. Approximately $1 is equal to 20 rupees. This is why, in purchasing power parity terms, India is the third biggest country in the world in terms of GDP. China is the first, USA is the second, we are the third. In terms of actual conversion, actual exchange rate conversion, India is the 5th biggest or 6th biggest now. Now with COVID situation, we have gone one step back. We had gone ahead of United Kingdom. Now we have come behind them. Okay. So that is India's position with respect to GDP. With respect to GDP in purchasing power parity terms, we are in the 3rd position. Now that is one place where it is used. Then World Bank classifies countries into high income level countries, middle income countries, and low income countries. That classification for income comparison, the national per capita income has to be converted to dollar. The same method, they use PPP to do that. Similarly, World Bank and IMF, they say that anyone who's earning less than $1.9 a day can be considered as poor. They draw the poverty line at $1.9, round it off to $2. Does it mean that it is 70 into 2, 140 rupees? No. They are saying that if a person is earning 40 rupees in a day or 38 because it's 1.9 and at 20 rupees per dollar, If a person is earning 30 rupees, 38 rupees or 40 rupees in a day, he or she can have at least one proper meal a day, which means they are above the poverty line. That is the idea. Okay, at least a very generic idea. That is the idea there. All right, moving on. Third and final concept inside the external sector terms, we have foreign exchange reserves. Forex reserves, shortened as Forex reserves. Okay, meanwhile, I'll try to answer Archana's question. Sir, capital account also includes inflow through FDI and FPI. What if making capital account freely convertible helps India by increasing dollar inflow? Yes, it can help the country. So that is where we try to make it freely convertible wherever possible. In terms of FDI, we allow automatic route, where it is freely convertible. The problem is if you make everything freely convertible, then the government cannot regulate in what sector FDI is brought in, because the government cannot dictate. The government has said freely convertible. Every sector will become freely convertible, free investment into India. Then domestic competition could be destroyed. They might come and invest wherever they want. The government may not be able to properly track them. Crony capitalism with foreign entities could come into the picture. Plus, capital itself could be very volatile. It may come and it could go out anytime we want. So it could lead to a lot of crisis situation. So as long as the current account is in deficit, it is not a good idea to make capital account freely convertible. If we are in a position where our current account is in surplus, which means we are not dependent on this FDI money, if that such a situation comes in, then we can say, okay, fine, we can make capital account convertible. As long as we have dependency on the capital account, we cannot make it freely convertible. If we do so, then we will be in trouble with respect to our current account. So that is to answer Archana's question. Hope that answers your question. Coming to Forex reserves. Okay. Yeah, welcome Archana. Coming to Forex reserves, we have India has a total Forex reserve of close to 500 billion US dollars. 500 billion US dollars. Approximately 500 billion US dollars. Now, it is designated in US dollar, doesn't mean that entire Forex reserve is in US dollar. Forex reserve is in a variety of form and shape. It is designated in US dollar, that's all. It is in the form of gold also, but what is the value of gold? We'll mention it in terms of US dollar for uniformity, for measurement. That is what we do. Okay. So Forex reserves of 500 billion US dollars. What are the components? There are 4 components inside it. There are 4 components inside it. Number 1, we have foreign currency, but not foreign currency. That is not the correct word. It is incomplete. Now, we have already discussed previously that no one prefers cash, especially when you're keeping it as reserve. No one prefers cash. Cash is preferred only by those people, only at those times where you know that you are going to use the cash for immediate transactions, where you require liquidity. Let us say you are earning some income, you will not want to keep entire money as cash. You think, one, it is not growing. The value of money will not grow if it is there in the form of cash, plus safety and other reasons. Okay, so what would you do? You would supply it back into the economy by giving it to the bank. The government and the RBI also prefers this because it reduces their cost in printing new currency. If everyone keeps it as cash, then money multiplication will not happen. So we supply it to the bank in the form of deposits, be it savings deposits or FD or whatever, we give it in the bank. So no one prefers to keep it as cash unless there is an expenditure requirement right then. Similarly, India's Forex reserves is also not in the form of cash. We will get dollars, the RBI earns dollars, the RBI gets earns or maybe converts dollars from the local economy. It gets euro, it gets pound sterling, it gets yen, yuan, mark, it gets a lot of foreign currency from across the world due to various transactions. And remember this, international trade does not happen only in dollars. Dollar is the most predominantly used currency, most widely used currency. That's all. So we might trade in euro also. With China, if we have excess yuan, we might trade in yuan also. With Japan, we might trade in yen. With Sri Lanka, we might even trade in rupee. If they have excess rupee and they want to pay us in rupees, we might even agree to that. It is possible. I'm just saying most of it is in the form of, say, let's say US dollar or some standard currencies like euro and pound sterling and yen and all those things. Okay. So we have RBI has a lot of foreign currency. Now, two situations are there. If the RBI keeps the foreign currency with itself, it is not earning anything. Plus, it is there is a maintenance cost associated with this money. Plus, the other countries are also feeling our money is getting stuck over there. If you could supply that money back to us, we would be able to manage our economy in a better way. If you keep it with yourself, we'll print new currency, and someday we will get back that currency because you will spend it, and there will be an excess money supply in our country. Okay? This is where you remember yesterday I taught you about Bank for International Settlements. They play a role in coordinating the activities between central banks. Whenever RBI has excess of these reserves, as a lot of these reserves, RBI will give it to the Federal Reserve. US dollar will be given to US Federal Reserve. Britain's will be given to their central bank. Yen will be given to the Japanese central bank. Now, we are not just giving it. It is our money. It is printed by them, but we have earned it. It belongs to us. So when we give it as a loan. Just like when we give it to a bank, we are not saying you keep it. We are saying you temporarily have it. You give me an interest because I'm giving you the money. You give me an interest too. So it is like a loan that we are giving to the bank. Similarly, we will give a loan of US dollar to the US Federal Reserve. Similarly, all the rupee earnings that they have, they will keep it as a reserve with us. Okay. Remember in when we are learning M0 and M1, I said other reserves with RBI, and I told you there are international organizations where we pay our membership fee in Indian rupee, which they'll give back to us and keep as a reserve with RBI. So that is an example of that as well. Anyway, it is not foreign currency, it is foreign currency assets. Why do I call it as asset? When you have money, only when you give it as a loan, it becomes an asset. Cash in hand is not an asset. FD that you put in a bank is an asset. Okay, that is foreign currency assets. All right. So that is foreign currency assets. It contributes to around 90 to 95% of our forex reserves is in the form of foreign currency assets. %, let's say. About 5% of our forex reserves is in the form of gold. About 5% of our forex reserves is in the form of gold. Okay. The remaining 5% is cumulatively in the form of two things about which you will have absolutely no familiarity. So you'll have to teach from scratch. One is called as reserve tranche position. The other is called as special drawing rights. The other is called as special drawing rights. Okay. Now, I will explain these concepts to you, both RTP and SDR. RTP is fairly easy to understand. You will not, RTP is reserve tranche position. It's fairly easy to understand. You will not have any problem with respect to it. But with respect to special drawing rights, it has a tendency to be slightly confusing. Because there is a lot of intricacy associated with it, it can get a little confusing. So my suggestion to you is that listen to what I say. there is a possibility that you may not fully understand it. If I go on explaining the concept repeatedly to you in class, we will never end the class. So I will explain it once. I'll give you a source video, an IMF video to watch, so that you can probably understand it better. You can take your own time to understand it. And after that, if you still have questions, you can always drop a mail to me. Okay. So we'll get to that conclusion and we will start discussing the topic of RTP. So in order to discuss RTP, to understand RTP, just give me 1 second. The board is not quite working. Okay, there is some issue with the board. What I'll do is I'll start teaching without using the board, or just hold on. I think it's better to teach with the board itself. Just it's a matter of a couple of minutes, so probably we'll rectify it. Just take a pause, take a breather. We've been going for close to 1.25 hours now, so you can take a small break, 2 minutes break or so. All right, we are back. So we'll continue from what I was saying. So to understand the concept of reserve transposition and special drawing rights, we need to understand how this organization called as International Monetary Fund works. You have to understand how this organization called as IMF works. See, IMF is an organization whose primary mandate is to ensure that it takes care of all the balance of payments issues of its member countries. Its primary goal is to tackle the balance of payments crisis of member countries. Okay, that is a general overview of International Monetary Fund. So we ask a question, how do they manage to do this? How do they manage to do this? Where do they get the money from? They are the ones who are giving loans or providing assistance when a country is in balance of payments crisis, like India was in 1991. Where do they get their money from? Think of IMF like a club. Okay, a club, like you have various clubs like your Gymkhana club and Cosmopolitan club and many clubs that are there, or even the Rotary club, Rotract, and all those things. These clubs essentially work based on the contributions from its members. Okay, these clubs work based on the contributions from its members, and as a result of the contribution, in proportion to the contribution, they also get certain benefits. Let's say you have a membership in a club there, and the club has a lot of facilities like ground and halls and all those. Then you might be paying a membership fee, but you have certain facilities like you can go there to relax every weekend, or you can use the ground facilities there at a lesser rent, or you get a lot of benefits like that. So IMF is an organization like that. It's like a club. To become a member, you have to pay a membership fees. That membership fees is called as quota. Quota is the membership fee of a country to enter the International Monetary Fund. How much is the quota of a country is determined based on a few factors. Number one, the GDP of the country. Number two, the stability of the country. Number three, the openness of the country. How open, how globalized is the country? And number four, the level of forex reserves of the country. These four factors, in some combination, different weightage to these things, GDP accounts for half of it, and so on and so forth. If you want the formula, it is available in the IMF website. I'm not going to go into the detail and give you, it's not very relevant. But these are the four factors based on which the quota is determined. Okay. So every country, the total amount that the IMF requires for its functioning is divided among all its member countries, 190 odd countries. It gets divided among all the member countries and in proportion to their role in the global economy. So based on this, in proportion to their role in the global economy, a certain percentage of the total money which IMF requires has to be given by the concerned member country. Let us say India's quota is 8% of total IMF's value, or 10% of total IMF's valuation. Okay, and let's say that 10% accounts to a value. 10% accounts to, it needs to be converted to money, right? That 10% accounts to some money. What is that money? So International Monetary Fund has its own currency called as SDR. International Monetary Fund has its own currency called as SDR. SDR is not a physical currency, it is only a concept. SDR is not a physical currency, it is only a concept. Okay, you have various calculations. You have calculations like 1 SDR is equal to, let's say, 1.4 US dollars, or 1 SDR is equal to 100 rupees. Similarly, SDR has an exchange rate with all the currencies. So when we are making payments, let us say we have to pay 1000 SDRs as our quota, we do not actually give anything called SDR because there is no such thing called as SDR, but the equivalent of $1,000, sorry, not $1,000, 1000 SDR. I'm sorry, I made a mistake here. 1000 SDRs if we have to give. For us to give 1000 SDRs, since there is nothing called as SDR, we'll give an equivalent in terms of US dollar or any other acceptable currency, or even the rupee. We'll give it in terms of that. So to give 1000 SDR, we'll require 1 lakh rupees. 1 lakh rupees will be equal to 1000 SDR. So that is how we have to give that. Okay. So here the IMF says you have to give your quota in terms of SDRs. But if IMF asks its entire SDR in the form of foreign currency itself, then the member countries may not be able to pay, because in their from their forex reserves, a huge part of that will have to be paid as SDR to the as quota to the IMF. So to avoid that from happening, the IMF says 75% of quota you pay in domestic currency. 75% of the quota can be paid by the country in domestic currency. We have already discussed this. RBI pays it in domestic currency. IMF says, what can I do with the rupee? So I'll give it as a loan to you. IMF keeps it as deposits from, sorry, RBI keeps it as deposits from IMF. Okay, but it is IMF's money. They'll earn interest on it. They can come and take it anytime they want. So 75% of the quota is kept in domestic currency. 25% of the quota has to be in the form of acceptable foreign currency. This 25% is what is called as reserve tranche position. This is called as RTP, reserve tranche position. Now, reserve, you can understand, it is kept as a reserve. Why is it a reserve for India in the first place? You need to understand that. We are giving it as a membership fee to IMF. Why is it a reserve for India? Because IMF says you're paying this membership fees, but you're originally paying this from your reserve. So what we'll allow you is, we'll allow you to access this 25% of money at any time you want as an interest-free loan. Although we pay this as a membership fee, this money can be accessed at any given point of time by India or any other country as an interest-free loan. That 25% we can go and take whenever we want, but we need to repay it within a given duration of time. So because it is accessible as an interest-free loan, it is considered as one of the forex reserves. Why is it called as tranche? What is the meaning of that tranche? Tranche means segment. So you divide something into 5 parts, that is called as 5 tranches. Okay, so that is reserve tranche position. Now it's not complete. I told you acceptable foreign currency. What are acceptable foreign currencies? The value of SDR itself. I told you SDR is given as this, right? One SDR is equal to this much, one SDR is equal to these many rupees. How is that arrived at? SDR itself consists of a basket of currencies. So SDR basket of currencies. There's something called as SDR's basket of currencies. There are 5 currencies which are in the SDR basket of currencies. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 US dollar, 2 euro, 3 Chinese yuan, 4 Japanese yen, 5 British pound sterling, okay, where these are not in the same weightage, these have different weightages as well. 41.73, which we can round off to 42%, 30.93, which we can round off to 31%, Chinese yuan 10.92, which we can round off to 11%, Japanese yen 8.33, which can round off to 8%, 8.09, which you can round off to 8%. So cumulatively, this will contribute to 100% of an SDR, which means one SDR is composed of 0.42 US dollar, 0.31 euro, 0.11 Chinese yuan, 0.08 Japanese yen, and 0.08 pound sterling. Or in other words, 100 SDR is composed of 42 US dollars, 31 euro, 11 yuan, 8 yen, and 8 pound sterling. That is what 100 SDR is composed of. The value of SDR is determined based on these set of currencies. That is how it is based on these currencies that this sort of an exchange rate is arrived at. Okay, so as the value of dollar changes, the value of SDR also changes. As the value of euro changes, the value of SDR also changes. So globally relevant, stable, accepted currencies which are predominantly used in international trade, those are what are put under the SDR basket of currencies. Till let's say 5 years ago, there were only 4 currencies. This currency was added only in 2015. Chinese yuan was added to the basket only in 2015. All right. So that is the concept of SDR basket of currencies. But we still have not spoken about special drawing rights. We have not even gotten to the topic of special drawing rights. So it is a right that we have, as the name itself suggests. Okay. Now we'll get to the topic of special drawing rights. Okay. Notice this carefully. Special drawing rights is shortened as SDR. So far, we have looked at as SDR as a currency of the IMF. We have looked at that currency gaining its value based on the SDR basket of currencies. Correct? Now, this has a very strong correlation to this. That is why it has the same name, but the concept is to be looked at slightly differently. Okay. What do I mean by that? It is like IMF's currency. It's like IMF saying, I am giving you some SDR. I'm giving you some SDR. And I already told you there is no such physical thing called as SDR. But they say that when you pay us a quota, we are going to give you, we are going to allocate. Okay, we are going to allocate some SDR to you. Let's say 100 SDR they have allocated to India. Okay, at that time we'll be holding how much? When they allocate 100 SDR to us, we'll be holding 100 SDRs. 100 SDR. It's the same thing. They have allocated 100 SDR from their perspective. From our perspective, we are holding 100 SDR. So two perspectives. Okay, and they are claiming that for the 100 SDR I gave you, you have to pay me an interest called as SDR interest. And then we claim, but you said this is an asset for me. I am holding it. For the 100 SDR I am holding, you need to pay me interest. So for the 100 SDR that we are holding, they will pay an interest to us. Okay. SDR interest. Now this is where it gets interesting. The same thing, it is the same 100 SDR. Whatever they have allocated to us, whatever we are holding, it's the same thing. For whatever they allocate, they are asking for an interest. For whatever we are holding, we are asking for an interest. We are asking for an interest. Now that will nullify each other. This is interest paid, this is interest received. It will be the same amount. So in effect, there will be no payment. Now you will wonder why this whole concept if there is no actual payment. This is where the concept comes into the picture. What is this special drawing right? Special drawing right is a facility that is provided to its member countries by which India can take an SDR not to IMF. It is not a claim on the IMF, but we can go to other member countries, like we can go to USA. We can give one SDR and say, based on the exchange rate between SDR and US dollar, you give me US dollar. We can rightfully go and exchange. We are not taking a loan from USA. Because USA is a member of IMF, because India is a member of IMF, and SDR is a facility provided by IMF, we can take the SDR that we are holding, we can take it to USA, we can give them 10 SDRs and say, I've given you 10 SDR, you have to give me dollars. If USA itself is not in crisis, they have to give us a dollar. If the USA is in crisis, then IMF will arrange for us to exchange it with some other country. IMF themselves will not give the money, but they'll arrange some other country to give us dollars if we want. Now, let us say USA itself is giving us. USA is taking the SDR and giving us money. They are not giving us a loan. Remember that very carefully. We are just exchanging the SDR for their currency. We have a right to do this. Do we have to pay interest? No, it is not a loan. Why do we have to pay interest? We have no obligation to give back the money to USA. But here comes the issue. They allocated 100 SDR to us. If we use 10 of those SDRs by giving it to USA and converting, we are holding only 90 SDRs. We are holding only 90 SDRs because we have used 10 SDRs, we have given it to them. So for 90 SDRs, we will get interest. We have to pay interest for 100 SDRs because that is what was allocated to us. So it is like this, okay? We are not paying interest to USA, but we are paying interest to IMF. We are converting the currency with USA, but we are paying interest to IMF because our holding has gone down. Now look at it from USA's perspective. Let us say USA was allocated 200 SDRs. They were holding 200 SDRs also. Now with India giving them 10 SDRs, USA is holding 210 SDRs. They were allocated only 200, which means that their interest earning from IMF will be greater than the interest that they have to pay. So essentially, India is paying interest to IMF and IMF is paying that interest to USA. Instead of directly taking a loan from USA, we are indirectly taking it. IMF is facilitating this process. But it is not, see, when it comes to loan, you ask for a loan, it depends on the provider of the loan whether to give it or not. When you ask for a loan, they may say no to it also if it is a normal loan. But here, there is no question of rejection. If we ask for it, they compulsorily have to exchange it. It is not a loan with them. We are not taking it on an interest from them, which is where IMF comes in, so that there is no negotiation on interest rate or anything of that sort. Normally, when there is a loan, there is a negotiation on interest, right? So that is not there. So IMF will ensure that that is not there. So this is the concept of special drawing rights. This is the concept of special drawing rights. And why is it called by the same name? Because ultimately it's the same thing. You give one SDR, what do you get? Whatever is the currency value, whatever is the exchange rate based on the currency value, that is what you are going to get. That is why both have the same name. The currency, IMF's currency is denominated as SDR, as well as this facility is also called SDR. It is one and the same concept. So that is also a foreign exchange reserve that we have, because this 100 SDRs or whatever number of SDRs that we have millions of SDRs. So that SDR, we can use it anytime we want. Okay, so that explains the forex reserves of India as well. I know some people might have some trouble understanding this at this point of time because it's all over the place. So as I told you, I'll tell you a couple of videos which you can watch to get a better understanding. Go to YouTube, type IMF quota. Watch this video first, followed by IMF SDR. IMF's official YouTube channel has these videos. You need not even go to YouTube. You can go to the IMF website and watch these videos. It is available there as a link also. And YouTube is more accessible. There you will find it. Both the videos are about 4 minutes or 5 minutes. You might have to watch the same video 2-3 times to get a hang of it, their language, and to understand the concept. They have said the same thing that I have told you. Okay, or rather, I have said the same thing that they have told, because they said it first. I did not say it first. So I am saying the same thing which the video also says, but you get the advantage of watching it repeatedly to understand it better if you want to. Is it that relevant to understand it? Maybe not. Just know that there is a concept called as SDR, there is a concept called as RTP, have a general understanding of it. What are the basket of SDR currencies? That is enough. If you want clarity, you can watch that video. Okay. So moving on to the last topic inside the organizations. So forex research is done. Because I've taught you about IMF, I'll also introduce you to this concept called as World Bank. So some interesting knowledge that you will get. Really. All right. So World Bank is actually such an organization doesn't exist. It's just a name that is given to a group of organizations. It's called as World Bank organizations, but there is no one particular organization called as World Bank. Okay, what is commonly referred to as World Bank is an organization called as International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, shortened as IBRD, International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, called as IBRD. Okay. So this was the first organization to be set up among, it is a World Bank organization, is a group of 5 institutions, out of which this was the first one to be set up in 1944 in the aftermath of the Second World War. After the First World War, they had set up a group of institutions, but it was realized that those institutions and that particular treaty and all those is what led to the Second World War itself, because they were trying to isolate Germany and the responsibility of the war was given on them. So after World War, they realized the mistake and they said we have to be more inclusive, and they said Europe has been significantly affected by war. Let us try to rebuild primarily Europe. Okay, so that is the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, for the development of the war ravaged countries. So in that context is what this organization was set up. It has grown in size, and it has expanded its reach across the world now. It performs certain functions. So primarily it provides financial it provides financial development and policy financing. That is the role that it has to help a country grow its financial status, and also whenever they are implementing a policy which is in sync with the World Bank policies, World Bank organization policies. Like the World Bank wants better infrastructure in a country. Like say in Chennai, we are building the metro railway. The World Bank says, okay, we will provide a loan for that because it is in line with improved infrastructure in a place. So those sort of loans are given by them. Most of the things given over here are loans, or not most. They provide only loans. Okay, so loans towards development, financial development of the country, as well as certain policies which they want to be implemented. World Bank says, if you implement this policy, I'll give you a loan for that. Okay, so that sort of a work is done by International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, primarily focused on developing countries, to improve the developing countries. The second one, there is something called as International Development Association. Okay, international. I'll just check if it's association or agency. Okay, International Development Association, IDA. IDA. What does IDA do? It provides loan at extremely low rates. So it provides low interest loans and grants. You know the difference between a loan and a grant. Grant is interest free. Not interest free. It is not a loan. There's no obligation to repay. Low interest loans or zero interest loans sometimes. Even zero interest loans. So zero to low interest loans and grants to really low developed countries, extremely low developed, less developed countries. Countries which are war torn, internal strife, all those countries, International Development Association provides either grants or provides zero to low interest loans. Then we have International Finance Corporation. IFC. So it mobilizes private investment. Mobilizes private sector investment and provides advice. It does not itself contribute money or give loan, but it enables some private entities, private investors to come and invest in the country. It facilitates. So there is a private investor, there is some NGO or someone of that sort who says, I want to invest in some country, can you guide me? This IFC, they go to IFC, IFC comes and directs saying, see, these are the projects that might be in line with what your vision is, and please do this over here. So that sort of a facilitation is done by them. Okay, that is what is given over there, International Finance Corporation. This brings another risk. So the investors will ask, private investors will ask, what is the guarantee that the investment will be good? What is the guarantee of a political stability? What if I invest based on your advice and then there is political instability over there? That is where there is a fourth organization called as Multilateral Investment Guarantee Agency, called as MIGA, M-I-G-A. Multilateral Investment Guarantee Agency, called as MIGA, which provides guarantee against political instability. So political risk insurance. So it's like an insurance company which provides insurance for political risk. Say if there is any political risk related instability and you are suffering, we'll help you out in that situation. That is what is Multilateral Investment Guarantee Agency. Then we have International Center for Investment, for Settlement of Investment Disputes. For settlement of investment disputes. ICSID. ICSID. It settles any sort of investment disputes between countries and the investor. Settles investment disputes. So what are the kind of investment disputes? Initially, when the investment was brought in, the laws were of a particular kind. After the investment was brought in, new government came in or the government changed the law with respect to the investment. All these will create some sort of instability. So whenever there is a dispute like that between countries, it is resolved by the ICSID, International Center for Settlement of Investment Disputes. These 5 organizations together is what is referred to as the World Bank Group of Organizations. World Bank Group of Organizations. None of these organizations are actually called by the name World Bank, but if at all someone refers to an organization as World Bank, it is this. The first organization is what is colloquially referred to as the World Bank. Any questions? We have completed this chapter. What is the difference between IMF and World Bank? Shivapriya, IMF, the goal is different. World Bank, the goal is different. IMF, the goal is to ensure there is balance of payments stability. It primarily deals with trade and payments. You saw whatever is in balance of payments, right? any external sector related issues that are there, the IMF takes care of that. World Bank does not deal with the external sector. World Bank deals with internally. What is there a poverty issue? We'll help to alleviate it. Is there an infrastructure related issue? We'll help you alleviate it through these various organizations that they have. These are completely different organizations, but both provide some level of loan and support and all these things. Even for external related issues, if there are issues, they'll provide loan. Like in the case of 1991, the World Bank also provided a loan to us because there was some internal instability. It could lead to internal crisis in India, so they provide loans. So these are completely different organizations in the sense. Okay. Vamshi is asking, is SDR a mechanism of giving and taking loans? They cannot be called directly as loans because when we exchange it from US for money, it is not a loan. We don't owe anything back to USA. Now, we might have taken some extra SDR from USA and we might have given our SDR and exchanged it for currency. Like in the system that I gave over here, we might only have 90 SDRs. There is no obligation to give it back to USA. We might actually, Sri Lanka might require some money. Sri Lanka may give us 10 SDRs and we might exchange it for some money, which means our holding will come back to 100 SDR. If we take, if Sri Lanka gives 100 SDRs to us and exchanges it for some money, then allocations and holdings are equal. There is no obligation to repay it back to USA. In that sense, it is not a loan. Don't think of SDR as a mechanism to take loan. Hope that is clear, Vamshi. Whereas your reserve tranche position is a mechanism for taking loans, interest-free loans. All right. Eighth and final chapter for us, financial markets. Okay. To understand the financial, let me make a disclaimer right at the beginning. Like I told you with respect to the money laundering yesterday, all that I am going to give you is certain theoretical knowledge, introduction to the concept of financial market. Do not expect that by sitting through 1.5 hours of our class, you are going to learn so much of financial market that you are going to become an investor tomorrow. No, you will not get anywhere close to that information from the class. If you are going to go and invest based on my advice, please give the money to me. At least I'll benefit out of it. Don't give it to some random company in the share market. Don't do that. Okay. So that is what I have to say. That's a disclaimer to begin with. Do not have any high expectations. Even do not expect that you will understand everything that you read in the newspaper with respect to the business page. I am not even trying to do that. I am not going into the depth of it. If you are able to understand everything that you are reading in the financial markets page of newspaper, then you will have enough knowledge to go and invest in the share market. That is the level of knowledge you require to understand that. What I am giving you is a very basic knowledge with which you will be able to confidently approach UPSC examination, because UPSC does not ask questions from financial sector, financial market, not sector, financial market. Then why am I teaching you? You should not go into an examination hall thinking, oh, what if they ask some basic question from financial market? I don't know. That should not be there. To give you that confidence that yes, if there is some basic question asked, I'll be able to answer. What if they ask a very difficult question? Because it's UPSC, you can never predict. If they ask a very difficult question, not just you, 90% of the participants will not be able to answer. The 10% who are very familiar with the financial market, may have personal experience with investing, they'll be able to answer. But similarly, every individual has 1 or 2 questions in examination, which you alone will know with relative ease for some reason. You might personally have some experience with respect to that. You might have read something in some remote thing, something of that sort. Everyone has that unique thing. 2 questions, 1 or 2 questions where you will find the entire crowd will struggle to answer that question, to understand that question. You will be like, this is easy. You will mark and go. So those sort of questions are there for everyone. It will even out. Okay, so don't worry about the complex questions, just understand the basics. That is what I'm trying to convey here. I'm only teaching this topic for 1.5 hours. So look at the importance. Public finance I took for 4 classes. That is like 10 hours and 12 hours I took that class. This 1.5 hours is all I'm going to take. So that is a very, very basic idea that I'm going to give you. That's all. To understand, with after that disclaimer, okay, how much you are not going to get back the money, Sri Lakshmi. So no interest. But if you are really keen on giving and earning some money, we can have a discussion post the class over email or something of that sort, where we can discuss the financial transaction between us, talking like an investment banker, right? Okay. So financial sector. So financial sector is different from financial market. So financial sector is a broader term, a very broad term. Financial sector primarily consists of banks and financial market, where what is the difference between bank and financial market? Both these places are places from where you can get money. Both of these are places from where you can access money. People who need money go there. People who have excess money give their money over there. Both are similar in that nature. That is what is a financial sector. Okay. But how is a bank different from a financial market? In a bank, borrower and lender are unaware of each other, are not in direct contact. The borrower and the lender are not in direct contact. In the financial market, they are in direct contact. The borrower and the lender are directly in contact, which means that in a banking system, you give money to a bank, bank gives money to some other person. You are the lender, you are the one who has extra money. The person who needs some extra money, who is falling short of money, you don't know who that person is. That person doesn't know who you are. There is no direct contact between you. The intermediary, the bank, is the one which is having contact with these two entities, you as well as the other person. Whereas in the financial market, someone says, I need money. You go there and say, you want money, I'll give you money. So directly, direct contact between the borrower and lender. Coming to the second part. In a banking system, the bank decides the terms and conditions. What is a bank? Bank is an intermediary organization. Bank decides the terms and conditions of both borrowing and lending. You are depositing money. Do you decide how much interest you want? No, the bank tells you how much it will give. So the bank decides that. Someone is borrowing money from the bank. Does that person decide who's going, how much he'll pay? No, the bank says this much I want. If you are interested, I'll give you a loan. Okay, bank decides the terms and conditions of the transaction, whereas here the borrower decides the terms and conditions. The borrower decides the terms and conditions. So you go there, the borrower says, you know what, I want money, but this is what I can offer. If you're okay with it, you give me money. Otherwise, I don't need your money. Borrower decides the terms and conditions. Okay, so these are the primary differences between bank and financial market. Okay, but because there is a direct contact between the buyer and the seller and there is no intermediary, what is the guarantee for the money? Okay, you give to a bank, bank is regulated by Reserve Bank of India. So bank gives you money, every single transaction of the bank will be recorded and the bank will trace it. So there is some level of security that you know that the money that you have given, the bank cannot take it and run away. But there is that level of guarantee is not there with respect to financial market, where you give money to a company. What is the guarantee that the company will give back the money to you and that the company will not run away? You have heard of this chit fund company scams and all those, right? Where you give money to chit fund company and one day you go there, the chit fund company is closed down, they have escaped to some other place. You have watched that in many movies. You have seen that in personal life happening, about news about that we read. That happens. Okay, so to prevent that from happening, there are two entities which regulate the financial market. There is an organization called as SEBI. Securities and Exchange Board of India, and there's an organization which we are all familiar with called as RBI. These two entities regulate the financial market to ensure that not everyone comes into the financial market and only credible players come and enter the financial market, especially as lenders, as borrowers. Not everyone can borrow from the financial market. Only entities which have the approval of SEBI and RBI in different spaces can enter the financial market. Okay, so financial market can itself be divided into first two types. Okay, the classification here is the same as the classification that we saw in budget. The classification that we saw in budget, revenue account, capital account. The classification that we saw in balance of payments, current account, capital account. What was the classification? Today's requirement, transactions are done in revenue account or current account. Future looking transactions are done in capital account in both budget as well as balance of payments. Very similarly, in the financial market, when someone requires money for the current expenses of a company, the present expenses of a company, that is called as money market. Short-term financial market. Okay, when money transactions are required, borrowing and lending is required for the longer term, for future development, for the expansion. Money market is about the current working. Okay, the other market is called as the long term, for the expansion. That is once again called as the capital market. In all three classifications, this market is called as capital account, capital market. Here the name changes: revenue, current, and now money. Okay, so money market is short term, capital market is long term. Short term refers to up to 1 year. In some cases less than 1 year, in some cases including 1 year. Long term, more than 1 year. Which means this is for immediate requirements. It is called as working capital. Working capital. Capital means money. Working capital means to run the company for today's needs. That is working capital. This is investment capital. To expand the company for the future, we require money. That is called as investment capital. Okay, this market, money market, is regulated by Reserve Bank of India. This capital market is regulated by Securities and Exchange Board of India. First, we'll learn about money market, then we'll go to capital market. Okay. See, in the money market, there is not an official classification, but there are two types of money market. One which is the organized money market, and there is an unorganized money market. Just to classify. So unorganized money market refers to your local money lenders that are there. In Tamil, we talk about Kanduvati and all those, very high interest rates. There is Blade I think in Kerala, they call it as Blade of giving loan. It is called as Blade. I don't know why it is called. I think it's because the interest rate is like a blade on your neck. I don't know why it is called. So all those are all the kind of money market that is there, unorganized. Your local pawn brokers and all those things. Those are examples of the chit fund companies, unorganized chit fund companies, and all those. There are organized and unorganized there. Okay. Now coming to that, we don't care about. We are not going to study about it. We are concerned with the organized money market, which is entirely regulated by the Reserve Bank of India. Okay, which is quite interesting because we are all under the impression that RBI monitors only the banking system. Not quite, but also because a lot of these money market instruments are in the banking system itself as well. Okay, we will take a look at some examples of money market instruments. To begin with, first point to note is that money market has financial instruments. Financial instruments called as securities. Financial instruments also called as securities. Okay. Financial instruments called as securities with maturity up to 1 year. Okay, this sort of a security in the money market provides a creditor position to the security holder. Now, what do I mean by this? Just to give you some extra information over here. Okay, just to give you some extra information, a security, what is a security? A security is a financial contract. A security is a financial contract between two entities, the one giving the money and the one receiving the money. Don't call them as lender and borrower yet. Between the one giving the money and the one receiving the money. Now, why did I specifically say don't say borrower or lender at this point of time? Because not all financial contracts are about borrowing and lending. Some financial contracts provide a creditor position. Some financial contracts provide an ownership position. So when you talk about creditor position, there is a lender and a borrower. So lender and borrower. The lender has a creditor position. But there is also ownership position where you become an investor. Where you become an investor. You become an owner, which means you own a share of that company. Whenever you are talking about a creditor position, there is a maturity associated with it. There is a maturity associated. You give money, but you give money for a certain duration of time. That is called as maturity. You are lending money, but you are lending money for a duration of time. After that period, it will be given back. The N in PNR. The N in PNR. But when it comes to ownership position, there is no maturity, which means that the money that you give will never come back to you from the company. The company doesn't give you back that money. The company doesn't owe you that money. You cannot go to the company and say, I gave you money, you give it back. No. Okay. The company says, I said I want money to run my business. You willingly came and gave the money, for which I gave you an ownership position by giving you a share. All that I promised is, at the end of the year, if we make profit, we will share it with you. If we make profit, we'll share it with you. That is all that they said. Okay. Now, if I have an ownership position with the company and I've given my money and I can never get it back, why would I take that risk? Because there is another platform in which, if I don't want to have this share, I can go and sell this share. I can take my share, I can sell it, but not to back to the old company itself. I can sell it if there is some other interested party, they can come and buy it from me. That is also a financial market. The place where you interact with the company, that is a financial market, and you interacted and you got a share, and you can now go and sell this share somewhere else. That is also a financial market. Similarly, you lent money, you gave money to a company. The company told you, I'll give it back to you after 2 years. Fine. 1 year later, you immediately need money. You cannot go to the company and say, give me back my money. The company will say, our contract was for 2 years. I cannot give you the money before that. But if you need the money, there is a provision where you can go to the other market and you can sell even this instrument. You can transfer your loan to someone else and you can get the money back from them, and they will now collect the money from the lender. It was issued in your name. The security was issued in your name. You can transfer the security to someone else's name and collect money from them. This is facilitated again in a financial market. So it is not just one transaction. The same instrument can be transacted multiple times in the financial market. In a bank, you deposit money with a bank, then you cannot go and say, okay, I'll take money from you, you go and collect my money from the bank. It is not allowed. The money, the deposit is in your name. Similarly, you took a loan, you cannot say, okay, that person will come and pay. You pay to that person will pay there. That doesn't work. Okay. So that's an introduction to security. So provides a creditor position to the security holder. Because why do I say only creditor position? Why no ownership position? Because I clearly said if it's ownership position, there is no maturity. But with respect to money market, I clearly told you there is a maturity of 1 year. So if there is a definite maturity, then it cannot be an ownership position, which means in a money market, there is no shares or any of the things, any of those things sold. Okay. So if something provides, just another addition, if something provides creditor position, you can call it as a bond. That security can be called as a bond. Whereas if it provides ownership position, you can call that security by the name share. All right. Moving on, I'll introduce you to certain types of money market instruments. What is an instrument? First of all, financial instrument. What is an instrument? Instrument is anything which you use for a purpose. Pen is an instrument using which I write. A security is an instrument through which borrowing and lending happens. So that is why it is called an instrument, but not just any instrument. It is a financial instrument. It is a device through which the monetary transaction happens. That is why we call it as a financial instrument. We are going to specifically talk about certain money market instruments. Certain money market instruments. Number one, the most trusted borrower of all in India, the most trusted borrower among all the borrowers in India, the government of India. The government of India also borrows for the short term, for their immediate requirements, for their working capital requirements through an instrument called as treasury bill, shortened as T-bill. Have we not already discussed in detail about T-bill and G-Sec? Have I not already told you about this concept called as issued at discount, redeemed at par? Told you about those things, right? Because the concept of interest rate works better when we are in the longer term, greater than 1 year. So it works on the principle of issued at discount and redeemed at par. It doesn't mean that the interest rate cannot work. Sometimes some loans are given on a 7-day interest, on a 1-day interest, on a 1-month interest also, that is there. So those are also there, but this is another principle which is followed. Treasury bill issued by Government of India alone. State governments cannot issue. Issued by Government of India. What are the maturities? We don't have 14, sorry, 91 days, 182 days, and 364 days. Okay. If any of you had typed any message to me in the last 5 minutes or so, I would have got erased because I got disconnected and connected again. So if you had asked me some doubt which I had not seen, please send it again for me to clarify. Okay, issued by the Government of India, maturities of 91 days, 182 days, and 364 days. 91, 182, and 364 days. Other three maturities that are there. Provides the least returns among all money market instruments. Why would people still invest in it? Because it is the safest instrument. It is the safest investment option. So it provides the least returns. That is a treasury bill. Number 2. Okay. Something called as certificate of deposits. This is also something that we have learned. Remember various kinds of deposits in the banking system. So issued by banks. Issued by banks. Maturity is between 7 days and 1 year. From 7 days to 1 year, various maturities are there. Okay. Second least returns after government security, after T-bills. Second safest instrument, because banks are very strictly regulated by the RBI. Second, not safety, safest. Sri Lakshmi, no, 14-day T-bills have not been there for the last couple of years. They were there previously. It's been abolished by the Reserve Bank of India. So second safest investment option, certificate of deposits, COD. Third, commercial papers. Commercial papers. Commercial papers are issued by companies, private companies, or any not private, it could be a public sector company also, but issued by companies or corporates. Issued by companies. Maturity remains the same. Maturity is between 7 days to 1 year. Highest returns. Highest risk or riskiest or most risky. I don't know whether there is a word called riskiest. Most risky. You can make up words in English. No one will know. Did you say make up or make out? Fourth one. Okay. fourth, there is something called as, we have again come across this term while learning concept called as, what is the name? I'm trying to recollect. MSF along bank rate. We had come across a term called as bank rate. While learning about that, we came across something called as bills of exchange or commercial bills. These are a different kind. We are not going to classify it based on risk or anything. These are a different kind of instrument. Okay. So these are issued by banks. But this is not a conventional lending borrowing agreement between two people. It is not a conventional lending borrowing agreement between two people. How it works is, let us say, see, if I require some money for the short term, I could go to some lender and say, give me money for 7 days or 10 days or 1 month or something. So that will be through, if I'm a company, it will be through commercial paper that we just saw in the previous slide. But let us say I am a producer, you are a vendor to me. Assume that you are a vendor, which means you supply raw materials to me. Okay, so you supply raw materials. Let's say I am supposed to pay you 1000 rupees or 900 rupees. Let's just keep it as 900 rupees. I am supposed to give you 900 rupees. Okay, you give me your supplies. I'm supposed to give you 900 rupees, but I immediately don't have money. I expect that 10 days later I'll get some money from somewhere and I can make that payment to you. So I tell you, can I make the payment after 10 days? That person says, I gave you your supplies. Why don't you just give me the money? He says, I don't have the money right now. I'll give it to you in writing that I'll give it to you in 10 days. And I'll also give you an extra payment on a 900 rupees. Maybe I'll give you a 10%. I'll give you 990 instead of 900. A person says, but how can I believe in your word? You are just a company. What if you don't give me? So I go to my bank. I have an account with the bank. I say, can you be my sort of a guarantee? Can you issue a bill of exchange to that other person? So your bank, because you have an account with the bank will issue a bill of exchange or a commercial bill saying that after 10 days, an amount of 990 will be given by this person to you. If he fails to give, I will give it on behalf of that person. So within 10 days, if I give, I'll take the commercial bill, I'll take the bill of exchange and give it back to the bank. Okay, if I fail to pay, the bank will pay on behalf of me and I'll have to pay to the bank. It is like a loan, but it is not actually a giving a loan and giving it back. You're giving me commodities in return for which I am asking my bank to issue a bill of exchange or a commercial bill for you. That is also a kind of short-term loan, because you could do something. You could borrow money and use it for your day-to-day working capital, which is nothing but buying raw materials and all those, or you can directly buy materials and say I'll pay later with an interest rate associated. That is bill of exchange. Okay, so you can write it in your own words if you are comfortable doing that. So maybe you can write it, acts as a guarantee during purchase or during commodity transactions. During commodity transactions between two companies. It's a very generic definition. There are loopholes in this definition. Is it only commodity? No, services is also possible. Is it only companies? Maybe not always companies, not registered companies. But just to get an understanding, you can write this. I just made it up. I didn't read it from anywhere. So there are obviously loopholes in this definition. But as long as you understand the concept, you can write it in your own words. You don't even need to write this. For your convenience, if you are struggling to put it in words, I gave it to you. Or maybe between two traders, instead of companies, you can write, between two traders, you can write. Traders could be anything. And finally, the last money market instrument that I'm going to talk about, fifth money market instrument that I'm going to talk about is something called as, See, it is not a instrument. It is a kind of market itself. It is a subsegment. So maybe you don't write it as the fifth one. You write it as a subsegment of the money market. Okay, a subsegment of the money market, something called as the call money market and notice money market. The type of money market itself, where call money market is where you borrow money. We have come across the term call money already in M3. You remember call/term borrowing. So call money, I have told you, is borrowing for overnight, 1 day. So 0 to 1, not 0, 1 day. Okay, overnight borrowing facility, which is 1 day borrowing. A market which deals with 1 day borrowing, where the interest is calculated on a daily basis, is the idea there. The interest on the loan is calculated on a daily basis. So overnight borrowing facility, that is a call money market, 2 days to 14 days. So a 2-week borrowing, but more than 1 day. So more than 1 day, but within 2 weeks. That is called as notice money market. So here when I say 7 day, so 7 days would refer to, for 7 days the interest will be calculated. So loan will be given saying over the 7 days you have to give me, say let's say 10%. It is not daily 10%. For that 7 days, 10%. Beyond that, one more 7 days, 10%. Here when I say overnight, I took overnight loan, I pay after 6 days. Every single day I have to pay an interest rate. So here the interest rate could be 2%, 3%. Every day you have to give 2% or 3%, which means for 10 days if you give, it will become 20%. Whereas this is 7-day loan is 20% or 5%, means 7 days 5%, 14 days it will become 10%, 20 it will become 15%, and so on. So that is the idea here. So that ends our discussion on money market. Any questions? I hope this is not boring. New information. See, I would not say that you don't have to read the financial market at all. Okay, the government related financial market concepts are important, but I have covered that in the public finance class itself. The T-bills and G6 and all those are important. Questions have come from T-bills, G6, but I have not seen any other question from anywhere. Question has come on P-notes as well, but P-notes we learned in the external sector. It is a financial market instrument, but we learned about that in the external sector. In that context, it is important. But domestic financial markets, I have not seen any questions, but it is good to know the basics, which is why I'm covering it. So capital markets has 2 different classifications itself. I'm not saying capital market is divided into 2. It is, but based on 2 different criteria, it is divided into two markets. So here there is a classification, and completely in an unrelated manner, here there is a classification. Here the classification is based on the ownership position it gives you. Okay, we have capital market based on the transaction. It can be classified as a debt market or as an equity market. It could be classified as a debt market and as an equity market. So this is based on the kind of security or the ownership or the position that it gives you. So kind of security based on the type of security. I told you right earlier, a security could give you 2 types of positions. It could either be a bond or a share. A bond or a share. Okay. Now coming to based on transactions, how many times, what is the number of the transaction that is happening? Okay. So based on that, we can classify it into primary market and secondary market. We'll first take a look at the security based classification, then we'll look at the transactions based classification. This is all that we are going to study in financial market. Once we finish secondary market, we are done. These 4 topics is all that is left now. Okay. Now coming to debt market. Just 1 second. Couple of requests have come. Please show the slide on commercial bills. So this is the previous slide. So 2034875. I hope you are referring to this slide. If you are asking me to show slides, please at least tell me the slide number. This is the bills of exchange, commercial bills. This is for Shivapriya. Okay, all right. I hope this is what you had asked for. Okay, there is debt market and there is equity market. First, let's take a look at the comparison between the two. A quick comparison. Okay. So in a debt market, okay, provides creditor position. Number 2, there is assurance of repayment of principal, assurance of interest earnings, So provides creditor position means that, assurance of repayment of principal means that there is a maturity period. Okay. Please note this carefully. Please note this carefully. The entire money market is a debt market. The entire money market is a debt market. Why do I say so? Because only with maturity it is there. Because the entire money market is debt market, we are not specifically calling it as a debt market. We will call it as money market. The understanding is it is debt that is happening there, because there is no equity concept here. There is no instrument without a maturity. That is why we didn't classify it that way. It doesn't mean that debt instruments are available only in the capital market. T-bill, all this is a debt instrument. 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 Okay. So don't get confused over there, because when I talk about bonds, when I talk about securities, I'll talk about T-bills as well as G-Secs. So you should not think, so is T-bill a capital market instrument? There is T-bill a debt market instrument. T-bill is a debt market instrument, but from the money market. Here we are classifying it as a debt market and equity market. Assurance of repayment, because there is a maturity period. If the maturity period is less than or up to 1 year, it will be a money market instrument. If it is 1 year, greater than 1 year, it will be a capital market instrument. But here we are studying this under the heading of capital market. So I'll say maturity greater than 1 year, maturity period more than 1 year. Because we are studying this under the heading of capital market. So maybe you can add a word over here saying that these are also debt instruments. These are also debt instruments. Hence, are debt instruments. What is the point about debt instruments? There is assurance of repayment. There is some interest or yield that is associated with it. Okay, so there is assurance of repayment of principal, assurance of interest earning. Okay, now coming to the equity market, the equivalent of this provides ownership position, number 2, no repayment of, we can't call it as principal, no repayment of investment. We can probably call it as investment, or you can call it as capital. No assurance of interest earnings either. Profits will be distributed. Profits, add the word if any. Profits if any, which means if profits are made, then they will be distributed. Otherwise, there is nothing that you are going to get out of it. So the interest earning here, assurance of interest earning till maturity. Till maturity. But here, profits will be distributed as long as the company exists. Not as long as you are alive. Because even when you pass away, you can pass on the instrument to some successor. You can pass it on as a inheritance to someone else. So as long as the company exists, there will be profit which is distributed, profits which will be shared with the holder of that share. So here you can say example, it's called as financial instrument is called as bonds, called as shares. Okay. So I'm going to introduce some terminologies related with the debt market. First of all, there is something called as face value. It is also called as the principal. The amount that is given as loan, the principal amount that is given as loan, that is the face value or the principal. The amount that is mentioned in the debt instrument. Now remember, in the concept of issued at discount, redeemed at par that we saw with T-bill, the amount that is mentioned or the face value is not the principal amount. It is the final amount that you are going to get back in that instrument. In this instrument, face value is the amount that is mentioned on the debt instrument. So it automatically is also the principal amount. Principal and face value are the same only in instruments which give you interest. Number 2, there is interest rate. This is calculated on the principal. Calculated on the principal. It is a rate which is calculated on the principal. It is given in percentage. Percentage of the principal that you will get as interest. It is also called by the name coupon rate. Coupon rate and interest rate are one and the same. Okay. Then you have something called as interest or coupon. The actual amount which you earn as per that interest rate or coupon rate is called as the interest. Earnings based on the interest rate. Earnings based on the interest rate. That is what is called as interest or coupon. Then we have something called as maturity, the duration after which the principal and the interest would be paid back. Maturity is the duration after which, the term after which the principal and the interest will be repaid. That is maturity. Okay. Then there is a term called yield. Now the term yield has many different meanings in the financial market itself. One of the simplest meanings that you can think of, that is what I am going to give you now. Interest is what you earn per year, because interest rate is calculated per year, right? 10% per year. Interest is what you earn per year. Let's say the maturity is for 4 years. Your overall earning at the end of 4 years is what is called as yield. Cumulative interest earnings is what is yield. That is the simplest definition that is there. There are other slightly more complicated definitions of yield, which I'm not going into now intentionally, because that will only end up confusing us rather than giving us more information. If you are really keen, drop a mail. I'll explain it over mail to you. Okay. Then there is one terminology with respect to the debt market which I want to introduce to you, something called as debenture. Something called as debenture. So debentures are the same as bonds which are issued here in the debt market. Debentures are the same as bonds. The main difference is that what we call as bonds are issued by governments and top rated companies. Top rated companies. It could be a private company, public sector company, whatever be the case. See, there are rating agencies. There are some agencies whose only purpose is to rate companies, saying this company is a highly rated company, AAA rating. They'll have some set of guidelines based on which they do the rating. Their past history of repaying loan, their performance, their history of paying the shareholders. Based on all those, certain companies are given a rating, AA rating, AAA rating, or A rating, or double B rating, B rating. There are different ratings that are there. There are companies who are set up with the purpose of giving those ratings. So those top companies which receive a top rating, and governments, because these bonds are safer, they are called as bonds. These instruments are safer. That is what is generally called as bonds. Debt instruments issued by companies with lesser ratings are called as debentures. Debt instruments of lesser rated companies or lower rated companies. Mostly private companies, because government companies will be highly rated, because the government will come and pay the loan if they are not able to repay. So private companies is what would come here. Lower rated private companies issue, when they issue debt instruments, such debt instruments are called as debentures. Okay. So that is the difference between bonds and debentures. Which will offer higher returns, bonds or debentures? Bond is option 1, debenture is option 2. Which one will offer higher returns? Yes, correct, Rini. Sri Lakshmi is choosing not to answer, I think. Oh, has answered. Okay, fine. Sorry, I thought. Okay, yeah, got it. She has answered. Yes, Archana correct, Sri Lakshmi correct, Vamshi correct. Yes, debentures offer higher returns. Why? Higher risk. The only way, see, if this is risky, if bonds are less risky, why would people give money to in the form of debentures? Why would people give money in the form of debentures? Debentures say, if you give, I'll give you higher returns than what you can get from there. So the slightly risky, risk-taking people who believe that, okay, I think I can take a risk, can deposit money in the form or give money in the form of debentures or for debentures. Okay, so that is about the debt market. So I'll just quickly give you some examples of different types of bonds that are there. So types of bonds. So we have something called as, to begin with, we can talk about say discounted bonds. Now this, as a first example itself, if I give you this, you might get a little confused, but it's okay. Discounted bonds. So what are discounted bonds? Discounted bonds are not issued. Generally, they are not issued in the capital market. Is a generally a money market instrument. So which is what? Don't get confused here. Why I am teaching this under the heading of capital market? Because it is a type of bond I am just teaching you here. It's a money market instrument. Please note that very clearly. Issued at discount, redeemed at par. Those are called as discounted bonds. Money market instruments. Example, T-bill, which is a money market instrument. That is an example of a discounted bond. Okay. Then we have fixed interest bonds, where the rate of interest is fixed, whatever may happen. As a contrast to this, we have flexible interest bonds, where the rate of interest could change from time to time. Every 2 months or every 3 months, the issuer of the bond may adjust the interest rate associated based on various factors. See, if we take a loan from a bank, a lot of loans, they are flexible. Every 3 months, the bank will change the rate of interest based on the market situation. That is there. So similarly, certain companies also borrow money and they say we'll pay different interest rates. There could be different reasons. One of the examples is inflation indexed bonds. One example is inflation indexed bonds. Whatever is the inflation in inflation indexed bonds, an example, that's an example of a bond. So how does an inflation index bond work? The bond will say whatever is the rate of inflation in the economy, I'll give you 2% more than that. I'll give you 2% more than that. If the inflation is 8%, you will get 10%. If the inflation is 2%, you will only get 4%, which means you are assured of a better return than the inflation in the economy. But you are not assured of, let's say 10% they assure, but the inflation is only 2%. You are earning a lot. That assurance is not there. But you are also saved from a situation where you are getting 10%, but the economy's inflation is 12 or 14%. You are saved from that situation. So provide some level of buffer for both. Flexible interest bonds. Okay. Then you have corporate bonds. Corporate bonds. Corporate bonds are issued by companies, top rated companies. Then you have government bonds. Example, G-Secs that are issued by the government of India. Then you have green bonds. Bonds which are issued for the purpose of environmental development or green initiatives, green infrastructure initiatives. Any of those could be there. Then I'll leave you with a very, very unique kind of bond. In this, I'll end it with something called as a perpetual bond. Perpetual bonds. What are perpetual bonds? With bonds itself, what did we say is a condition or is one of the features of a bond? So I told you what you get in a debt market is what is a bond. It has a maturity. I told you it has a maturity, and you will keep getting interest till the maturity is over. That is one of the features that we said. Whereas in the equity market, I said there will be no maturity. But perpetual bond is a unique kind of bond where there is no maturity at all. Okay. So they'll take loan from you, they'll keep paying you interest, they'll never repay the principal, but they'll keep paying interest forever, assured interest forever. Now, this is not a very safe thing to do for borrowers. So their rate of interest return may be very, very low, like 2% or 3% or something of that sort. That could be there. Generally, these sort of bonds you don't see anymore. You don't see anymore. But such a bond exists. That's why I'm introducing such a thing to you, where there is no maturity, interest payment will happen till the end of life of that particular company or whoever borrowed the money. So that is called as perpetual. Perpetual means forever. Okay. All right. Moving on to the next topic, which is the equity market that we have. Okay. Number one, equity capital. Equity capital is the equivalent of the principal amount that we talk about. How much is the money that is received? Okay. How much is the money that is given by you? What do you get? So equivalent of the principal amount in a debt security, in a debt instrument. Okay. What do you get in return for the equity capital? You are issued shares. You are issued shares. You are issued shares. Okay. Share is a financial instrument which talks about, which gives you the information of how much, what are the information it gives? It gives you the information is how much of equity capital was given. Okay. How much does this translate to as a percentage ownership of the company? Percentage of ownership. What percentage of ownership do you have in that particular company? All these details will be mentioned in the share. Equity capital gives you the percentage of ownership that you will have of that particular company. Okay. Every share has a face value. Every share has a face value, which means what is the price at which you are buying, which is mostly the same as equity capital. Okay. But the difference here is that one share has a face value. Equity capital could be the total money generated through issue of 10 shares or 15 shares or 100 shares. But face value is of that particular share. Okay. The face value of a share is determined by the company, but there is another concept which we learn about in the secondary market called as the market value of the share, which we'll not learn about now. For now, let's just restrict it to face value of the share. Okay. Then we have something called as dividend, which is the earnings from that share, earnings on that share. That is the dividend. Dividend is a share of the profit. Dividend is a share of the profit. Okay. That is about the equity market. Okay. You will that is not, there is a little more information about the equity market, but we will understand that information when we are learning about the primary and secondary market. So we'll go into the next classification of primary and secondary market, so that we'll get a better understanding of this equity market itself. Okay, so next classification that we have is primary and secondary market. So next heading is primary market. So put the major heading as classification of capital market based on transactions. Put the heading as classification of capital market based on transactions. Earlier you would have put the heading classification of capital market based on securities. Here classification of capital market based on transactions. Primary market. Okay. See, when a company issues a share for the first time in the market, which means a company is issuing a share, those transactions happen in what is called as the primary market. Okay. Issue of new shares happen in the primary market. Issue of new shares or bonds, that is what happens in the primary market. Issue of new shares or bonds happen in the primary market. Okay. Now we will learn this primarily from the perspective of shares, but you can understand this from the context of bonds also. So I'll just explain everything from the context of shares. You can translate that to the concept of bonds also, because a lot of concepts are left in the in shares. Okay. Now shares could be issued by the company either as a as something that is available for everyone to access, or it is something that is accessible only for a limited group of people. Even shares they could issue in that particular classification. For example, I have told you this before, this understanding. I am a company. I want to generate more money. I want to generate some extra capital. I want to expand my company. I'm looking for money. I could directly get money from some individual, 1 or 2 or 3 individuals. I could directly get money. That is not share market. That is directly investing in the company. Now, if I don't want to generate capital from a limited number of people, but I want to generate capital from many number of people, because I don't want to give up my management control over the company, what will I do? I'll issue shares. But even then, I could issue shares to a private group of, let's say, 1,000 people, where I know these are the people who might be interested in my company, where, let's say, there are some employees that I have in my company. To those employees themselves, I'll give my share. I may give my share. Those are called as private issue of shares. Now, private issue of shares is not of much importance for us, because it is an internal factor that the issuer of share, the company which is issuing the share, they are doing it among people that they know. There is also another thing which is called as public issue. Public issue is where the company comes and makes it available for anyone. Anyone who is interested in buying a share can come and buy the share. You have heard of something called as Bombay Stock Exchange and National Stock Exchange and things like that, right? Those are not examples of primary market. Those are not primary market. Those are what we call as secondary market. What is a primary market? There is no fixed location. A company may be issuing it directly to an employee. A company may be issuing it on the internet, saying that on our platform we are issuing our shares. Okay, or the government may have its own platform to issue their shares for their T-bills and G-Secs for the first time. Okay, primary market could be anywhere. It could be just an internet space somewhere, not specifically. It could be different place for different companies. So that is what is a primary market. So public issue of shares is where it is open to the public. This is what we are keen to learn more about, public issue. Now, when you have public issue, the people to whom the shares are issued, they may not all be very aware of what sort of a company is, what are the terms and conditions and all those. So before public issue can be done, it is very, very important to get a proper approval from SEBI. It is strictly regulated by SEBI. Issue of shares or public issue is strictly regulated by SEBI because it's public. Not everyone may be well aware of things, so there should not be any hidden clauses or things like that. Now coming to public issue itself, public issue itself could be of two types. When a company issues shares for the first time in the history of the company, for the first time ever, a company which was so far not a share based company, it was run by a group of individuals. Now shares are issued for the very first time ever in the history of the company. It is called as initial public offering, shortened as IPO. It's called as initial public offering. When subsequent shares are issued for the second or the third time or the fourth time or the fifth time, those are called as follow-on public offering, FPO. Those are called as follow-on public offering or FPO. Now remember carefully, follow-on public offering is not a resale of existing bonds. That's not a secondary market concept. Both these are primary market concepts. Both these are issue of new shares. When new shares are issued for the first time in the history of the company, that is initial public offering. When new shares are issued again for the second time or the third time or the fourth time, new shares are issued. Further and further new shares are issued. That is follow-on public offering. Now, let us consider, let's classify follow-on public offering itself into a few types. What are the circumstances in which follow-on public offering happens? Okay. One, the most basic kind of it, which is the new issue. New issue means, okay, the company has decided to issue a second set of shares. First, they had issued, let's say, 100 shares. Now they want to issue 100 more shares or 50 more shares. First, they had issued 100 shares to some people. Now they have to issue 50 more shares. They are making it available for anyone. Anyone who is interested can come and buy the shares. That is called as new issue, which is the same as follow-on public offering. Whatever I defined as follow-on public offering here, which is follow-on public offering. Okay. But within the follow-on public offering, in addition to new issue, there are some other concepts as well. There is something called as rights issue. What is the rights issue? Some people, some companies, what they do is that they feel that when they are issuing some new shares, already 100 shares have been issued, now 50 more shares are going to be issued. The company feels, see, when we were issuing our shares for the very first time, these 100 people trusted in us more than other people. That is why they bought our shares. So rightfully, we should give them an option of buying the share if they are interested. We should not just make it open for all, because open for all could be first come, first serve, highest bidder and all those things. So let us, before we get there, let us give these existing shareholders an option of buying the share at the price that we are selling it if they want. So rights issue. Existing shareholders can buy the shares. Okay. Existing shareholders can buy the shares if they want. This is open to all. Then there is another concept called as bonus issue. What is bonus issue? It is also follow-on public offering or follow-on offering, which is to the existing shareholders, but this time you're not charging the existing shareholders. You're saying, because you have been a shareholder with us, we want to reward you and we want to give it to you as a gift. So sometimes what the companies do, instead of sharing the dividend, they say, instead of giving you dividend, we'll give you more shares. Because buying shares from the market may be very costly, we'll give you a share as a dividend. Okay, bonus issues also for existing shareholders, but this one is for payment. This one is for payment. This is as a reward. We have one more concept called as split issue. You will understand split issue better once we learn the concept of market value, which I told you earlier. Remember when I told you face value of a share, I told you market value I'll teach you in the secondary market. Once we learn that market value in the secondary market, you will understand the split issue better. So we'll just leave a little bit of space here so that I can teach you secondary market and come back and teach you split issue. Okay, so we have the secondary market now, which is the last heading that we have. So let's first try to understand what is a secondary market. Secondary market is a place where, see, in the primary market, you pay money, you get a share or you get a bond. Share doesn't have a maturity. Bonds in the capital market or the money market has a maturity. What if you want the principal amount back before the maturity period in the case of debt instruments, and in the case of equity instruments, you are not going to get the money at all. So what if you want that money back? Okay. Equity or a share is something like gold. You go buy gold, the gold is there with you. You cannot take the gold back to the shop from which you bought and say, I bought gold, now give me back that money. That money you cannot ask. But you can take the gold to maybe the same place or to some other place, and you can say, whatever is the present value, give me that. The present value may be more, the present value may be less. That can be done. That is an example of secondary market, second hand sale. You gave a loan to someone and you got a financial instrument, but now you are in urgent need of money. You cannot go and ask them, because I told you, remember right at the beginning, the borrower sets the terms and conditions. You cannot set the terms and conditions in the case of financial market. So they have said they'll give back the money after 2 years. You cannot go after 6 months or 1 year or 1.5 years and ask for the money. If it is urgent requirement for you, you will have to go somewhere else and find a place to sell. Okay. Now, if there is no option, if there is no organized secondary market, the primary market itself will fail. Why? Because you are giving money and there is no option for you to go and sell it somewhere. There is no option for you to redeem that money if you are in an urgent scenario. So no one will come to the primary market itself in the first place, because it is like your money gets locked there forever. So what happens when the primary market itself is set up? There is a parallel secondary market setup. In case you want to sell, you can go and sell it over there. All right. So that is how the secondary market comes into existence, where transactions of existing, not new, existing shares and bonds, which is nothing but financial instruments. Transactions of existing shares and bonds happen. New bonds and shares are not issued in the secondary market. Only already issued bonds and shares are transacted in the secondary market. If you look at it, secondary market transactions do not contribute to GDP at all. Remember GDP, total value of all final goods and services produced in a year. It has to be a newly produced good. Financial market would contribute, but sorry, the primary market would contribute, but the secondary market is just second-hand goods, second-hand instruments. It will not contribute at all. Okay, so transactions of existing shares. Okay, now for the transaction to happen, let's say you bought a share at rupees 1000. This is the face value of the share. You bought a share at rupees 1000. It gives you a certain percentage of ownership of that company. I told you all about that earlier when I told about shares. This is the face value of the share. Okay. Now, when you go to the secondary market and you're trying to sell it, you should know what the market value of that particular share is. If you don't know, you will be easily cheated. The new person who's buying, who doesn't know, would be cheated. So there is a possibility of all this cheating. So to prevent that from happening, what the companies will do is, the companies will go and register with this market. This market is called as Bombay Stock Exchange or National Stock Exchange. Stock Exchange. Bombay Stock Exchange, National Stock Exchange, BSE, NSE. These are examples of it. So these companies will go and register themselves with this stock exchange. That process is called as, number one, listing of companies. Listing of companies means that stock exchange will have a list of companies whose shares can be traded there. That only if you are registered with that particular stock exchange can that company's share be sold over there. So before you issue your new shares, you have to ensure that you will eventually be listed in the secondary market, because only then will buyers come and buy from you, because they know they can go and sell their shares over there. So only listed companies shares can be sold in the secondary market, sold and bought in the secondary market. So all the companies which register with the stock exchange will be listed over there. Okay, that is called as listing. There is a process called as delisting of companies. If these companies do not follow any norm set by the stock exchange or norm set by SEBI, then as a penalty, these companies could be delisted. If those companies are delisted, their shares cannot be transacted in the market, which means that those companies, the shareholders of that companies will be in trouble. Those companies will be in trouble. So that is delisting. Delisting is a process by which their name is removed from the list. Okay. So there is listing and delisting. Now here comes the next major concept, what is called as the market value of a share. Okay, market value of a share. Now 1000 rupees is the face value of this share. You know, let's say the price of this pen is 100 rupees. Let's say this pen is available in very limited quantity. Only very limited quantity is available. Every year more and more new pen is not produced. Let's say this share and this pen doesn't have any expiry. Let's say it doesn't end at all. It is perpetual ink. Imagine this like an Akshaya Patram where unlimited supply of ink is happening. It will never get exhausted, which means only 10 pens are there in the entire economy. And this pen keeps on shifting from one hand to another hand to another hand to another hand. That is what happens. Okay. Now, initially, I may have bought this pen at 100 rupees. And then when I am trying to sell next, people are willing to offer 120 rupees for this pen. So now the face value of this pen is 100, but the market value becomes 120. And then subsequently, when it is going to be sold, people are willing to offer 140 rupees. Market value becomes 140. Over the years, over 3 years, 5 years, the market value of this pen has become 500 rupees. The face value is still 100. The market value has become 500. But after a period of time, some innovation has happened and they have created an alternative to this pen. So no one wants this pen anymore. What will happen? The price will drop from 500 to 400 to 300 to 200 to 100. Ultimately, it is selling at the same value as the face value, but it doesn't end there. If no one wants this pen, why would anyone pay even the face value? So the market value could go even below the 100. The market value could be 50 rupees or 10 rupees. Because very few people want this. Maybe someone is willing to pay 10 rupees saying, okay, I can keep this in the showcase, you give me. Okay, so maybe they are willing to pay 10 rupees for that purpose. So the market value could be greater than the face value or lesser than the face value, purely determined by demand conditions, demand and supply. Shares are limited in supply because shares cannot be just randomly, you cannot increase shares. You need to get SEBI's approval, you need to have a proper classification how many shares you can issue, because each share has a value. Depending on the company's valuation is what the face value of the share will be determined. They're limited in supply, so the demand and supply will keep on, because the supply is limited, the demand, as the demand increases the price increases, as the demand decreases the price decreases. Now if you have been watching the news, okay, you will find that watching the financial market news, a lot of times you will find that some companies have this green up arrow pointed next to them, whereas some companies have a red downward arrow pointing next to them when you're talking about financial news. Okay, this is something that you will find. Now what are these things? If a company's shares market value during that particular day has increased in comparison to the previous day, they will indicate this green up arrow for that particular company share. This company share market value has gone up, people are willing to pay more. The opposite of it will be a downward red arrow, people are willing to offer less. Now how is this determined? There are a wide variety of factors. How is that particular company performing? If the company is declaring their result for a particular quarter, whether they are profitable or not, that day if there is a good result, green, it would be green. If there is a bad result, it will be red. If the government has brought in some policy which is favorable to the company, then maybe it will be green. Which is unfavorable to certain companies, those companies will face red. If the election has happened and the party which everyone expected will be pro company has come to power, green. Anti company party has come to power, it will be red. So a wide variety of factors could determine. The GDP itself has slowed down. What does GDP slow down? Production slows down. Production slow down means what? The company is producing less, profit will be less. GDP slows down, it will be red. So a wide variety of factors, speculation, people's expectation of what could happen to a company, that could push it to green or red. So a wide variety of factors will determine what will be the market value of a particular share. This market value is what is listed on the share market. Is this clear? Yeah, Reni, I will explain that. Now that I have explained market value, without much delay, let me explain the split issue as well, and then I'll come back to what is this concept of Sensex and all those. That is the last thing that we have. So split issue. Now, a company initially issued, let's say, a share for 1,000 rupees. That is the face value. Okay. Now, the market value of this share has now risen so much that it is now selling at 10,000 rupees. At 10,000 rupees, those shares can probably be accessed by only limited number of people. Very few people. See, a lot of people do not have huge sums of money to invest in one share. They want to invest in multiple shares. So if it says 10,000 rupees has to be invested in a particular share, a lot of people may hesitate to buy that share. Okay, people may hesitate to buy that share. So the company feels that if the market value of the share keeps on increasing like this, no one will eventually buy the share, or limited number of people, only some people will buy those shares. So to prevent that from happening, to make the share accessible to all, they may say, because of the high market value of the share, we are going to split the share into two. We will create two shares of 500 rupees each. It could be split into any number. We would split it into 500, two shares of 500 rupees each, which means what? The market value of this share will now become 5,000. The market value of this share will now become 5,000, which means this share becomes more accessible to people. Okay. Now coming here, how does it impact? Split issue issued to existing shareholders. Okay, right, the next point, it increases the shares in the hands of a person without increasing the value, because the value is still the same. One share is divided into two, that's all. which means if they want, they can sell half a share now because it is split into two. They can sell one while retaining the other. So it increases the number of shares without increasing the value of the share that is held by the person. They'll still have 10,000 rupees worth of share, or face value 1,000 rupee worth of share. But instead of one share of 1,000, they are having two shares of 500. That is what is a split issue. So this is to existing shareholders, this is to existing shareholders, this is after paying money, this is without paying money. But both these are extra shares, adding extra value. Here also it is to existing shareholders, it is also extra shares but without adding value. New issue is open to all, not to existing shareholders. Now coming back to secondary market, we are almost done with secondary market. Just a couple of more points. Okay, there is a terminology called as bears, and there is another terminology called as bulls. Okay, bears are generally considered to be very defensive, so it will not go and aggressively attack unless necessary. So it will try to hide and try to be safe. So bears are people who try to be safe, who are risk averse, who always expect the worst. Bulls are aggressive. They are aggressive, which means they expect something good at all times. So they are risk takers. Bears are risk averse, bulls are risk takers. You have seen this picture in New York Stock Exchange and probably in Dalal Street also of a bull, because bulls are what drive the market. They are the ones, when there are more bulls in the market than bears, the prices keep going up because they'll keep buying more and more. When there are more bears in the market than bulls, the price keep coming down because they are trying to sell. They are thinking the worst could happen. Let me try to sell. Let me try to sell. Let me try to be safe. Okay, that is bears and bulls. Bears are always trying to sell their shares. Bulls are always trying to buy their shares, buy more shares. So bears expect something bad to happen. Bulls expect something good to happen. Okay, so but what is important is not bears and bulls. The market itself is classified as bullish and bearish. What is market is bullish? Predominantly the market is in such a way that there are more buyers. Predominantly the market is in green, then it is bullish in nature. Predominantly the market is in red, then it is bearish in nature. Okay, now coming to the important question of what is this concept of Sensex and Nifty, which we come across in the news. Okay, there is something called as Bombay Stock Exchange and National Stock Exchange. Two exchanges where the stocks can be exchanged, where the shares of the companies can be exchanged. Secondary market. These are both examples of secondary market. Okay, so Bombay Stock Exchange was established a long time ago. I think in the 1980s, 70s. I'm not very sure. It's the older share market and stock market, and National Stock Exchange is a newer share market. Okay, secondary market. Both are secondary markets. Okay, so these are the places where all the companies which are listed, their shares will be traded on this platform. But they also want to give a general indication to people about how the economy is performing, how that particular share market is performing. For that, what does Bombay Stock Exchange do? Bombay Stock Exchange takes the top 30 companies in their list of companies. They may have 100 or 200 or 300 companies. In that, they'll take the top 30 companies and they'll put them on a list. First ranked company to the 30th ranked company. Top 30 companies they'll put on a list and they'll say, based on the overall performance in the market value of their share, the shares of these top 30 companies. And these are not fixed top 30. So there might be 31st position of a company one day, that will come to the 30th or 29th. If they perform well, they'll go up. So it is very flexible. They'll have a list of 100 or all the companies and they'll say top 30 companies. Using these companies, we are going to create an index. What is an index? giving relative weightage to these companies, they are going to say we are going to put it in the form of a number. You remember how we came up with consumer price index and wholesale price index based on price of certain goods and services? Similarly, based on the market value of the shares of these companies, these 30 companies, the Bombay Stock Exchange comes up with an index called as a sensitive index, which is what is Sensex. A sensitive index, sensitive to market happenings, an index which is sensitive to market happenings. Okay, that is what is Sensex. Okay, now what happens is that this entire economy is represented by these 30 companies. If these 30 companies, not all of them will perform the same way, if majority of these 30 companies perform well, the market value of those 30 companies will go up. The remaining few companies which don't perform well, they'll go down. So cumulatively, the Sensex will reflect whether there is an upward movement or a downward movement. If a majority of the 30 companies perform well, the Sensex will go up. Sensex is one number, one value which has been arrived at by giving different weightage to these top 30 companies and translating this into one number. We are not going to go into that, it's not important, but understand that there is a value which is arrived at. That is Sensex. So when majority of the companies perform well, their market value goes up, Sensex also goes up. When majority of the companies do not perform well, their market value comes down. Everyone is trying to sell. When everyone is trying to sell, demand is less, so the market value will come down. So Sensex value also comes down. That is Sensex. This is indicative of market happenings. This is indicative of the economy. This is indicative of the political situation in the country. Whatever determines the market value will also determine the Sensex. Okay, that is Bombay Stock Exchange. Similarly, Nifty, National Stock Exchange, is another index that is there. More recently means 1990s, early 1990s. So National Index 50, that is Nifty. National Index 50. National Index 50, Nifty. Top 50 companies in the National Stock Exchange are listed like this, and an index is set, and the upward and downward movement is tracked over there. So Nifty and Sensex both are indicative of the overall performance of the companies in the economy. Okay. So that is the end of that. Okay. So Shivapriya wanted me to explain bullish and bearish again. So when you can also link these two concepts. When the Sensex keeps going up, when can the Sensex go up? When majority of the companies in the Bombay Stock Exchange is doing well, their market value, the demand for those shares will be up, their market value goes up, so Sensex goes up, then the market is bullish in nature. If majority of the companies are performing poorly, then their value, people don't want the shares anymore, then the demand for those shares will be down, their value comes down. If that is the case, then the Sensex comes down, the market is also treated as bullish. So bearish is when the market value keeps on going, bullish is when the market value keeps on going up because of the aggressive buying, and bearish is when the market value comes down because everyone wants to sell and safeguard their money. So that is the difference. I hope, Shivapriya, that answers your question as well. Okay, stock exchanges, Archana, no, it is not. One second. No, primary market is not confined to private issue. Primary transactions don't happen in the stock exchange. Stock exchange, I've answered already. Primary transactions don't happen in stock exchange. Stock exchange is a secondary market. Okay, that is to answer Archana's question. So we have completed the entire financial market as well. With this, we have completed core economics. We started with national income accounting. We went to growth and development. Then we went to public finance, money, inflation, banking, external sector, and finally with financial markets, we have completed core economics. So the questions, as I've told you right at the beginning when we were discussing terminologies class itself, I have told you these class topics, they will give you very limited number of questions in the examination. two types of questions you can answer based on this. One, direct questions based on the concepts that I have taught. Second, application based questions that you can answer. But in the exam, you'll have to sit and think and arrive at the answer. But you need that concept clarity, which will be given in the, which will be arrived at based on the class notes that are there, right? But current affairs based questions, which are the majority of questions in economics, you will have to read the newspaper, and that is the source. We have not covered all the current affairs in class. We have very touched upon some current affairs here and there. That is all that we have done. Okay, with reference to, with respect to mains questions do not expect any sort of direct questions from the notes or from any textbook. There will not be any direct questions. Current affairs is your only source for preparing the mains questions. But to understand the current affairs, to understand the logic that is mentioned there, your class notes is very important. So for while studying prelims, read the class notes, use one reference book, preferably Shankarayya's Academy book, or you can try other books also if you are comfortable. Don't ask me for specific books. I have told all that I have to talk about in that. So that, do that. But when it comes to mains preparation, keep all the book aside. Just read from the newspaper, government documents or websites, or PIB and all those. That should be your source for writing answers, plus editorials, any points that you note from there. Take a look at previous year mains questions. Take a look at how to tackle those. All the specific current affairs based, leave it. Generic questions could also be asked. Concept based questions could also be asked. What are the measures the government could take towards addressing this situation? Those are, even though they are current affairs, they can be answered based on a general understanding of the economy. So look at all those things and practice those. All right, so that is it from my end. We might still be meeting probably for discussion of certain tests. Have you written your first economics test, pre-storming test? Because I discussed that for batch 1 and 2 a couple of days ago. So you have not written. So once that happens, test 4, I don't know how many tests that you have written. So for that discussion, we might be, because you are the weekend batch, I don't know whether a discussion will be done exclusively or it will only be shared with you. Either way, because you're a weekend batch, there are some things like that where we don't have the time bandwidth to actually have and come a physical session. But if it is possible, we'll meet again in some other sessions. General economics, I assume, has not started yet, so it will start sometime soon, which is not necessarily a continuation of this, which will be about the Indian economy. So based on whatever you have an understanding now, you will be able to continue with those classes. Even if you had not sat through some of these classes, it won't make much of a difference except in the understanding of certain concepts. All right. In addition to this, if you have any queries, any sort of questions, please feel free to drop a mail to me after once checking on your own whether you can find out an answer. If you want to stay connected beyond the classes, if you want to just drop a mail to me, ask me certain questions, feel free to. You are a class of very limited number of people, so you can we can have a connect after the class also. So if you are keen on it, you have my email ID. Just drop a mail to me. After that, if we want to communicate through some other means, we'll find out. Okay, but drop an email to me if you have any queries. Okay, and do share your if you have any opinions to share about the class. If you like something, if you did not like something, it will help to know your point of view with respect to that. So if you can, please take the time to write an email to me as well. All right, thank you so much. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. So Karan is asking a question: new shares can't be issued in secondary market? No, it is called a secondary for a purpose. New shares cannot be issued in the secondary market. All right, Archana, have I answered your question? And special thanks to Sri Lakshmi for being a sport with respect to all the mocking that I did. And Rini also, who has been very regular with respect to attending these videos. Today, I don't think Jawahar is there. Let me just check. I don't think Jawahar is there. So thanks to Jawahar as well, and Archana, who used to come regularly, and anyone else. I don't remember who else came. Sorry if I missed out on someone else's name. I have a very short memory. So yeah, you can disconnect and leave if you don't have any further points. You will have a class at 5 o'clock. There's no change in that. Okay. Thank you so much. Have a nice day, guys. You too. Karan. Welcome, Ashwin. Rini, I don't have access to others, so I will not be able to provide that. And even mine, I said you drop a mail to me. We'll take it forward from there. Okay. So email will be the first point of communication. Yes, I believe Shivapriya, there is a mains test for all of you. I wasn't a mains test done already. Okay, so my mail ID, there are some people who are still asking for it. I had shared it previously also. My mail ID is sarath.r@shankarias.in. Okay, so that is to Rini and Ashwin. Okay, so if you have not written, it will be there. A mains sort of test will be there, but your mains overall, there is a proper test series that will be there. That is not a part of the course, I believe. So you will have to join separately if after your prelims, if you feel like you will clear the prelims also. So that will be separate, Shivapriya. But as a part of this, class tests will be conducted with respect to about say 10 questions, and such small segments of tests will be conducted. Welcome, Rini. Welcome, Shivapriya. Okay, just 3 people left. I'm assuming that is all that you have queries. So thank you so much. Welcome, Amshi.